Fine.
Okay, shalom. I am here with Cal, who
Hi.
people from this corner of the internet should know. He's on Randos United on pretty much a regular basis. Um,
Yeah, too often.
no, not too often. I actually, it's been very interesting, and that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you. We did start this early, so yeah, I don't expect. Well, I didn't know how many people would show up, if people would show up, especially it's the 4th of July. Um,
If it's
but
recording, I can put it on my own podcast.
oh, sure. Um, it's yeah, you can. I mean,
I mean,
it
just the
goes.
audio when we're done.
I I I should be able to download. I'm hoping will be able to download if
If
I
not, it's not
cleared
the
up
end of
enough
the world.
space. I, I think I cleared off up enough space because well, I can certainly download it from YouTube because it's going out on YouTube right now. So
Okay.
and it'll stay there. And somebody's watching. Two people are watching. Okay, so you had somewhere you wanted to start.
I'll give a little bit of a synopsis over what you were talking about, which was a very beautiful comparison of the Hebrew Bible to arithmetic and of the Talmud to algebra. Sort of the difference between a calculus with constants and calculus with variables, talking about the infinite nature of God, which is, of course, central to Judaism, and central to its relentless uh, tearing down of idols, of false gods, false values.
Shari's
Hi,
here.
Sherry. Um, Let me see. And you did say. See, I started off by saying um, I find myself um, most often in the position of having to support truth claims when people ask me, basically, why are you convinced of what you're convinced of? And so I said that, very often it comes down to hermeneutics and or philosophy. And, to the extent that someone acknowledges an interplay between those two things, usually I'm there, or I'm in the position of trying to understand the perfect sort of self and the perfect approach to scripture, wherein scripture is somehow like self-interpreting in a determinate way. And so that's what made you start talking about uh, the Talmud and the Tanakh. And then you did sort of get down into like truth claims and sort of the universality of truth when you were saying that you do believe that if you had been raised Christian, you would still have become a Jew, even though in this lifetime, um, you've been born a Jew. And so I thought that's a fantastic place to start, and sort of like just understanding like what is either the philosophical and or scriptural case that say a Christian should become a Jew. I mean, maybe that's already too hot a topic for some people,
Oh
but I don't know.
no,
I
I
like
love I love the question.
because
Uh,
the way I am, I seek truth through very like almost like offensive questions.
oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
I love it. And if we weren't opposites, I would have you on my channel all the time.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. He means opposites in terms of circadian rhythms.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So when we tried to schedule this, we found out that the two of us do not operate on the same schedule at all. um, so
Well, I'm barely awake right now, but the mornings I have more energy. So
and I'm barely awake right now because I haven't
yeah.
woken up yet. um, so um, the uh, well, I mean, there's a lot to say there. First of all, um, in Judaism, we don't believe that you necessarily should become a Jew, even if you believe in Judaism, right? And that's part of what's so exciting about the Noahide movement, which has started in the past 50 years, of once again having what existed only 2,000 years ago before Christianity, which were Gentiles who believed in the God of Israel, right? And I actually think that Acts 15, more than a debate over physical circumcision, was a debate over conversion. And I think the decision of Acts 15 is actually very consonant with what Judaism teaches, because I think the early Christians were Jewish, right? And I think that changed over time. So, but when it comes down to, I mean, as a Christian, every time Christians attack the Old Testament, right, or talk about how Judaism is flawed, to me, it's all I can think of is you're sawing off the branch you're sitting on, right? Because the New Testament, the Greek Bible, is built on a foundation of the Tanakh, right? The Hebrew Bible. And so this is the funny thing. I don't agree with Father Stephen DeYoung as far as Paul in Judaism, or N.T. Wright as in new perspectives on Paul, because I don't think they have it right. But at the same time, I think Father Stephen has a narrative that's defensible, whereas I think the Christian narrative for the past 2,000 years really has not been defensible. Have you heard of Franz Rosenzweig?
No, I haven't. Are you saying the narrative is not defensible due to some deficiencies in Paul?
Well, I think Paul hijacked Christianity from Jesus. That so yeah, we haven't interacted much. This is what I'm famous for, is my dislike of the Apostle Paul.
I have watched a fair amount of your videos.
Okay.
I guess, the question would be something like, is Paul just messing up all over the place, or is he in some sense offering an inspired update to the true religion? And of course, you're going to answer no to the second question, but I
Well,
would like to know on what basis
so Paul,
we should say instead that he's just messing up all over the place.
so Paul says that his gospel is shining light on the Tanakh viewed through a glass. What is it? Through a glass darkly, right? Um, and I think that's actually the proof about how wrong he is, because what we see, what I have seen, and I think all of history shows, is that pagans coming out of the darkness walk into Christianity and are in fact ultimately moving to Judaism. And that's where the light is in the Old Testament. And Christianity, more than anything, has been an introduction of people coming in from the darkness, right? I don't think Christians, well, some Christians do, which is part of the reason there is the Noahide movement. There's a lot of Christians who see religious Jews, and their question is, well, if you're this religious, why don't you see Christianity as the fulfillment of Judaism? Why don't you see Jesus in your Bible? And the fact is, because he's certainly not there how Christians interpret it. So Franz Rosenzweig.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to do the following and just sort of bring the the historical method and the textual criticism type considerations to the New Testament and point out sort of how deficient it is when read through a fundamentalist lens. I fully agree. But what I would also do is I would take those same approaches and turn them on the Hebrew Bible and look at stuff like
No,
Exodus, like
it's beyond that.
okay.
The Hebrew Bible, the main thrust of the Hebrew Bible, however you read it, is God is not a man. God is infinite. God is the creator. There's one God, and God is not finite.
Do you think that there is any allowable sense ever in which God could be a man or be understood to be a man in certain contexts?
So this is an analogy that one of my rabbis gave, which I really liked. He said, we talk about the leg of a chair or a table, right? Because that sort of analogy, right, helps us. When I talk about the leg of a chair, you know which part of the chair I'm talking about, right? But that doesn't mean that the chair has a leg in any way comparable to my leg or even the leg of an animal, right? So, in a similar sense, the Torah talks about God. He talks about the hand of God, the leg of God, right? It is a footstool for his legs, right? And that helps us to some aspect understand something about God. But to turn that into an actual literal human being God, that is a complete rejection of everything Judaism is.
Well, so because the finite is not the infinite, right? And so the way that I look at that is, and if you look at, say, the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, it's not just equating or identifying Jesus with God the Father, whom in my Trinitarian scheme I see as the unlimited aspect of God, or of the Godhead. And it's not just equating Jesus with that, because you can't. In other words, what is omnipresent cannot be localized. What is unlimited cannot be limited. And what it's saying, he says, I and the Father are one. The oneness is something that could not be without difference. So there is some sense in which this man is God.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, what kinds of necessarily this is a qualified kind of claim, because it's not saying that he's God in the sense of the omnipresent or in the sense of the absolutely unlimited. And so, I look for, like, if you have, like, some people claim that they can't make any more sense out of this than like a square circle, right? And so my question is, like, if that person were to watch Bruce Almighty, the movie where Morgan Freeman is portraying God, do they have like this total non-cognitivist breakdown during certain parts of the movie, and it's just like,
Well,
I don't even remember or can't even comprehend what I
okay.
was seeing because it was like a square circle, like.
So, okay, Father Stephen likes to say Judaism believes in a multi-personal God. And if you define person the way Trinitarians use the word very weirdly, yes, we believe in a multi-personal God. And the problem is actually not the fact that there are three persons. The problem is there's only three persons. Because, in fact, we believe in an infinite number of persons of God. And the idea that a human being is the Son of God, that a human being is made in the image of God, that a human being represents God in some manner in the world, is not a Christian innovation. That's Genesis 1. And that's why I think Jesus, when he said, I am the Son of God, wasn't saying anything new. It's the problem is monogenes, is that he is the only begotten son. Um, that places him beyond what humanity was created to be, right? And that's part of my problem with the idea of the virgin birth, right? If we are actually going to have theosis, if we are actually going to be one with the Father the way Jesus is, right? So am I going to go back and be born of a virgin?
Yeah, okay, so just to like return to the kind of Morgan Freeman Bruce Almighty analogy.
Mm.
In that movie, is the point of the movie that Morgan Freeman is God because he's in the image of God and he kind of abstractly images or reflects God in some way that everyone else also does?
He, I mean, I didn't see the movie, but
Neither have I.
if we're talking about a person of God, right? This idea that, for example, the burning bush was a person of
Well,
God
see, I'm not. Oh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
because it was able it it said "Ehia asher ehia," I am becoming that which I am becoming, right? Or I am that I am. Um, then yeah, the burning bush was a person of God or a theophany, as the theologians say. But when you say that if I were to throw water on the burning bush, um, and let's say it did get extinguished, or even if it didn't, that's somehow deicide, right? That's somehow killing God or extinguishing God. That's a complete misunderstanding. So a person of God, right, as a representation of God in the world, is not God. That's like a representation of God in the world, and that's what we want more than anything, is to bring the infinite God into the finite world, and that is in fact our mission. But ultimately, when you make God finite, when you start seeing God in this literal way, and actually, this is the first time I'm thinking about it, but I think in a very real sense, you're showing how the pagans who didn't understand the Jewish concept of God took a very Jewish idea, which is that every human being represents God, and in their to the degree that they do the will of God, they are in fact embodying God in the world, and turned it into something idolatrous and literal, by saying no, it's Jesus. Go ahead.
So that's you said to the degree that they do the will of God, you are embodying God in the world. And this kind of raises the question of like the sense in which a video game character is the person playing the character, even though it also isn't.
Mhm.
Because it's like the translation of that person's will into another medium. And to the extent that that character does the will of the player, it's embodying the player in that world. And then the question is, can it be that somehow some human did God's will and only God's will, did it to the maximum extent? And would that make that person God in some robust sense?
So, actually, what Roman says is, he's fluffy ribbit, um, is actually very, it kind of anticipated your question. He says God's presence is everywhere, but God is more somewhere than other places. The idea of specialness within or without God shouldn't be a problem. How special does Jesus have to be for his specialness to be a problem? Um, and so, uh, to the extent that a human being um, is embodying God's will in the world, right? I think he is bringing a degree of holiness into it. My problem is saying God is somehow contained there, right? Is it possible for a human being to um, always, from birth to death, only do that which God wants? Um, I suppose theoretically it is possible, even though part of what God wants us to do is to repent, and therefore um, that Mary Sue type of Jesus almost is a negation of the humanity of Jesus, right? Because then he's just perfect in a way that just is inhuman, right? Um, so for I guess it's possible for someone to nearly perfectly do, but again, like it's human to err, right? And to if God were to create someone who, as a baby, never cries at the wrong time, right? Then that's not a human being. That's something else that God has created, especially if it's through a virgin.
Well, I have to admit to not understanding Fluffy Ribbit's first two criticisms, even though his last name is like mine, which should give me some understanding.
Um,
But
so
but
he's talking about, okay, so in we say that the temple is more holy the than a bathroom, and it's more, God's presence is more real there than in a bathroom, right? Does that mean that God isn't in the bathroom?
oh no, it doesn't mean that. And I think the Trinity, again, like what I said, it is allowing for the distinction between God in the sense of the omnipresent, unlimited, and God in the sense, if there can be a sense, of the localized. And you know when it says, or when people suppose that Jesus was and is God, my mind sort of goes to that idea of a video game character, which, if you take that, if that's your only conception of Jesus, and within Christianity they would call that a heresy as well, because it's to miss if you like, the hypostatic union of his two natures, his human and his divine nature. Um, and because they call that docetism or Valentinianism, where he's just kind of like a hologram. And so then the question is, can there be an interplay between, say, a human nature and a divine nature, the result of which is somebody who, at every choice point within the degrees of freedom that are open to him, always chooses in accordance with his deepest and most integrated identity, that identity where in love he is at one, he is most at one with the people, and even to some extent.
Are you capable of embodying this hypostatic union?
I suspect that part of the meaning of Christianity is that I suspect that if one were to act totally in accord with one's deepest or truest self, then one would be embodying God in the same way that Jesus did. I'm not
And
sure. I'm not sure whether that is possible. I'm less sure on whether that is possible. I think if I could do that, then it would be, because they say that God became man so that, I guess
man could become God.
Gregory of Nazianzus said that. But I think that is at least the theological hint or portent of the incarnation.
So
All,
if that is merely what the incarnation is saying, that's not that's that's Genesis 1. That's nothing new to Judaism. If you're merely saying that Jesus was a human being that um, did God's will at all times, and in that sense, he embodied God into the world. That's Genesis 1. That's not Christianity. That does not distinguish between Judaism and Christianity in any way. Be the What becomes Christianity is again this idea of the monogenes. He is God's only begotten Son, and he had to come and do this and die, and the rest of that story, right? Which makes Jesus God in a way that's completely different from how human beings are, in fact, the children of God all through the Hebrew Bible. Because you are, in a Christian sense, I would say, uh, well, it really does depend which, but I would say most Protestants would say that no human being can, in doing the will of God, incarnate God in the world as we are now. And frankly, I think that is a so I think this is important. The virgin birth is important, partially because when a man and wife come together and become godly enough to actually create another human being, right? In Judaism, that is considered the pinnacle of embodying God in the world, is a man and wife coming together and being so godly that they create a human being, right? Obviously through God, but uh, contrast that with Jesus's virgin birth. And not only is he born of a virgin, but in fact, uh, Mary has to be conceived immaculately in order for her to be that virgin, right? It's a complete negation of the Jewish idea of incarnating and embodying God as a human being.
Okay, so you said, based on the way that I answered your question and the way that I brought up Gregory of Nazianzus, that what I said about the incarnation is not different or distinguished from Judaism. And I guess the first comment I would make on that is that I'm not so sure that when the limit of theological accuracy is reached, that Christianity will have to be distinguished from Judaism. Maybe it may only be because I'm not one of those Christians who believes that, oh, you didn't say the magic words and you didn't make this propositional profession, therefore you're going to hell no matter what else you did or what else you believed. The other thing is, I am not when I imagine this person who, Jesus of Nazareth, who perfectly did the will of God, I am not so sure that I'm not sure what was going on where he was able to do it, and in what sense he was doing God's will. Whether he was sort of grasping the low-hanging fruit, that you and I are expected to grasp. Hold on, sorry, my son, he's awake. He's out here.
Okay, so Roman said, But humans are in the image of God, and killing them is bad. Jesus is, let's say, even more in the image of God, and killing him is even worse. I don't see how it's worse. And yeah, killing people is bad, which partially is why the idea of the crucifixion being some sort of atonement before God, or something that God wants, is
I'm so
not.
sorry. I'm really sorry because
Oh no,
I was talking to my fiance that. Oh, wait, were you responding to Fluffy Ribbit?
I was, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh yeah. um, um, yeah. So doing, I mean, but the part of the story is that Jesus doesn't really die. Well, if he doesn't really die, then he doesn't really die. So what's the point? My sort of super low Christology take it is that Jesus has attained some sort of enlightenment and oneness with God, and what makes him special is that he's first of his lineage, which we share in. Again, how can we share in it if we're not born of virgins through things like the Eucharist? Again, like, how do we become born of virgins? But the thing about Jesus is you've got this really hard problem of or Jesus is God, Jesus is man, which in some ways we can all be, but somehow he's very special, very tricky. I think it's a square circle. So yeah.
So, yeah, the way to be that, to sort of unite the human nature and the divine nature. But see, the divine. Okay, hold on. Okay. Yeah. Let me try to back up because I was trying to make a point about. You say like, what does God want from me? Well, He wants for me to for me to repent when I sin. But presumably He didn't want me to sin either. So what would happen if?
Are you sure about that?
I think so. I'm attracted to the argument of this philosopher who said uh, in my view refuted Calvinism with the following little argument. She said that Calvinism makes God the author of sin. Sin is precisely what God does not intend, and therefore Calvinism is false. So yeah, I would say sin is what God doesn't want.
There are different types of sins. There are sins which are a result of us being finite, and in the fact that God created us in a finite manner, are endemic to the human condition, which is, it says the righteous man falls 7 times and gets up. Um, God tests us. God gives us the opportunity to be wrong and to fail. And yes, God gives us the ability to choose, but there's our choice is limited, and we are limited, and we will always fall short of the glory of God, because he is finite and we are, because he is infinite and we are finite. Sorry. So it's sin as in missing the mark. I If God did not want us to ever miss the mark, um, he would have had to create us infinite, which is not possible.
So see, what I'm talking about is the difference between, because surely God allows the sins that come of our finitude, but at the same time, I would say they don't reflect His positive will. If there were someone who could have done only His positive will, um, you know, that would be a theophany of a very robust kind, and also, It would mean that his human nature was surrounded. I'll use a phrase from Oliver Crisp: surrounded and interpenetrated with the divine nature to a degree that at least represents a significant curtailment, if not a complete removal of, or really it's just a total, what's the word I want? Redirection, or what's the word I want? Sublimation, is that the word? It's a complete repurposing, and upliftment of the freedom that's normally associated with that human nature, because of the way in which it is constantly informed by
Did
the divine nature. But I will say that if God were to do this in the case of every human being, that would be a kind of exclusively top-down, executive only, form of, if you like, self-configuration for God. There wouldn't be any more bottom-up
did
sort of spot.
did Jesus go to the bathroom?
Yes, I believe so.
Was he representing God when he was doing that?
Yeah, I mean, if we were saying that with every action he did the positive will of God, and I'm not sure that that was the case, or if even my concepts or categories are sufficient to make sense of it, but I can entertain the idea that he may have, yes, sort of in.
For me, I think it goes back to this idea of the infinite God and reducing him into this finite human being. And it's within Judaism, the types of things you're explaining still make sense, which is we as finite beings have some capacity to, and in fact, that's the image behind us, on my thing, is like the tetragrammaton showing the image of a human being, right? And God being represented in the world. That's just Judaism. The question becomes, what is Christianity? And if you're willing to say that Jesus was not perfect and embodying God in a way that other human beings are able to, and again, it goes back to this word monogenes.
Oh no,
right?
I think I am willing to say that, because
That
again, I talked about the sins that we do, which
right?
God allows, and which
Okay.
he certainly was not unaware that we would commit them. But I'm saying I am drawing a distinction between God allowing and God purposing, God's positive will. And I'm saying if there was someone who never sinned and therefore had no need to repent for that, because he did God's positive will and not sinning, that would be a different reflection of
Could
God in that person.
could Jesus have sinned?
Could he have sinned? I mean, if he is the God man, then the answer is no.
Then how is he human?
Well, so then the question is, is it, so a human being has to sin?
A human being has to have the capacity to sin, otherwise he's an angel.
A human being has the capacity to sin. Does that mean he has to sin?
I actually think it is impossible not to miss the mark as a finite being. Um, I am not as wedded to that as has to have the capacity to sin.
I'm with you in terms of human beings having to have the capacity to sin. I don't know that human beings have to sin. That seems like a very powerful
Okay,
claim.
so just the capacity. So did Jesus have the capacity to sin?
That's an interesting question. I think it might come down to how you define capacity. I want to say there's a sense in which no, he really didn't have the capacity to sin, and that was not. I mean, you can say that, um, you know, a human being must have this capacity, and if not, then they're not a human being. The answer to it, framed that way, may be that he's not a human being because he's not a human being in that sense. He is fully human in another sense, but not that
What
which
sense?
requires.
What makes us human?
What makes us human? I would say that it's the possession of a human body, a human nature.
A human nature. So what's a human nature?
Human nature is, the kind of representative and affective capacities that go along with being a human being. You can image or represent certain goals and pursue them as good, represent them to yourself as good. And it's also, you said God is infinite and we're finite. I mean, in a sense, that's right. But in another sense, we are infinite. And the way that we self-configure, it is like internally imaging or modeling the infinite.
Well, I mean, that's God blowing, right? What does it mean for God to blow into Adam's nostrils, right? So in some sense, the infinite, right? God from within himself put this animating spirit within us, right? But again, it seems to me that we're dealing with absurdities here. Jesus became human. He became a human being, but not actually a human being, because he was a sort of automaton, incapable of any sort of sin, incapable of actually being human. Like, what does this incarnation of this automaton achieve for you at all?
There
Like,
has to be
what's
some
the
kind
point?
of, well, I have to admit, I'm not fully, I don't know the exact, say, theological motivation for the incarnation. Like, where theology is a system, I don't know entirely why incarnation has to be there. So it's not something. I've seen arguments why it has to be. I've not been convinced by them. I've seen arguments why incarnation is a priori impossible. I've not been convinced by those. There was something you said earlier and I forget. Sorry.
Take your time.
Brain cramp. No, I just forget.
Yeah. So I mean, when we're talking again,
Dealing with
my question.
absurdities. Well, so the thing is, if your definition of a human being is someone who sins, then
Who has
yes.
the capacity to sin?
Well, no, okay, someone who has the capacity to sin. But see, the thing is, when you talk about capacity, and we talk about a possibility that was never actualized, what is the difference between that?
Oh no, that matters a lot. So this is Deuteronomy 30, right? God says, "I have set before you life and death; choose life," right? And the fact that you had that choice and you chose correctly is, in fact, the whole reason the world exists.
I guess
God created the world so that we may choose good over evil.
I guess we can, if you want, we can get into the semantics of the word capacity, if that seems like an important point to you.
Well, I think the ability, I mean, again, the question becomes, how was Jesus human? Like, what is this incarnation that's happening? Why is Jesus somehow important? Like, Jesus is set apart. Like, Christianity is defined around the life of Jesus because he was the Son of God, and he somehow did something. Like, so where does Christianity even begin? Because right now all you're describing is Judaism.
All right, so just
you're describing a Jesus who is somebody who is divine by virtue of the fact that he does what God wants him to do. That's I don't see how that's any of the rest of Christianity.
So let's get back into the word capacity. And because maybe
Okay.
the way I answered it the first time, I was thinking like, if you have a capacity or a possibility that's never actualized, is that really still meaningfully a possibility? I sort of answered the first time in the sense of no. However, the way the scriptures talk of Jesus, they do speak of his being tempted, which
Right.
would seem to imply a capacity for sin, which was nonetheless not actualized.
Okay.
So I think the scriptures do allow for that. I
Okay.
think theologically some sense can be made of that, perhaps.
So if Jesus was tempted, then how is he different than you?
I would guess the difference is that I sin when I act on temptation. But
Uh,
Jesus was yet sinless. He did not act on his temptations.
okay. Um, I see zero problems with this. I see zero reasons because you have the same divine nature that Jesus did. Now, your human nature and you're a hypostatic union now, and as long as Jesus is a hypostatic union like everyone else, except he made different choices. Okay, he's another creature just like me.
I think that God was exercising his direct influence in the person of Jesus um, more than in my person. I think that's a difference. Again, Oliver Crisp speaks of the divine nature as surrounding and interpenetrating the human nature of Jesus.
So
And that's
you have more free will than Jesus did.
you might say that my human nature it is going to act more as it does because it's not in dialogue with something beyond itself to the same degree as was evidenced in
So
Jesus.
you are more godly than Jesus was.
I don't know how that conclusion follows.
Because God has the ability to choose. God has a will. Whereas this Jesus that you're talking about doesn't have an ability to choose. He's completely nullified to God, whereas you are an actual being. You are somebody capable of doing things which Jesus was not, which is your own will.
Well, I'm not sure I said it was completely nullified. I'm trying to convey the idea of two natures in an harmonious exchange or interplay. I don't know that that involves the complete nullification of the freedom associated with that human nature, or if human nature is only to sin in every case, so that any curtailment of it is, necessarily.
How do
I
you define sin? Define sin.
guess I would use the scriptural definition of missing the mark.
Okay. Um, and so when you miss the mark, um, are you doing your own will?
Yes, I think so.
But you're missing the mark. Like, you know that that's the mark, right?
Oh, I don't know that I have to know that it's the mark when I sin. It might be that on some level I'm deliberately aiming at something else.
Okay. So you're not deliberate. So when you don't deliberately sin, you're actually not separating yourself from God's will at all. You're you just by your
No, I
nature
mean,
of being
because
fallible.
this is not sensitive to the way in which the word mark can have, two different meanings in a context like this. Because if the mark is what I ought to do, that's
Mhm.
not necessarily the same sense of the mark understood as what I happen to be aiming at when I deliberately sinned.
Well, so okay, there's deliberate sin and there's sin that's not deliberate. right?
Well, no, I'm not. I'm actually. We may agree in the sense that I think if I did something I didn't even know was a sin, then that wouldn't be sin. But
Oh,
I'm
I
just
think
saying
it.
a
Oh, I
mark.
definitely think it is. Even I think you can definitely sin, um, and in fact, I mean, there are various types of sins in described in the Bible, and deliberate sin is distinguished and from inadvertent sin in the Bible.
Oh, okay. Well, to me, inadvertent sin, I don't really see that as a thing. Um, However, maybe there could be some sin in like you're responsible for having to figure out what all is sin and what isn't, and to the extent that you were not diligent enough in like figuring out and categorizing and cataloging the different kinds of possible sin, you may be uh, responsible in that kind of higher order sense. But I simply meant when you talk about missing the mark, the word
Mhm.
mark can mean two different things,
Right.
but in both cases, something which um, is deliberately aimed at or can be deliberately aimed at.
So, I mean, the term chet in Hebrew, which is the word missing the mark, the sin. Um, yeah. So there are various types of sins the in the Bible, and our capacity to sin and the fact that we in fact do sin, I would say, is defining of our human nature. God gave us the the choice, and in that sense we are more godly than the animals or the angels who don't have that freedom, that degree, that power, that godliness of being able to choose. That's defining of being human, as far as I'm concerned. And so when Jesus is described as somebody who was completely sinless, especially by his very nature, that that's not even something that I would consider to be a good thing. He, as far as I'm concerned, he's just an automaton. He might as well be an angel. What's the point?
So, if you speak of sinfulness as definitive of humanity, I'm not sure I would follow you that far because it seems to a priori rule out the possibility of being in perfect harmony with God. What I see in Jesus, or what I imagine speculatively as an amateur theologian to be happening with Jesus, is that we have God God wielding his direct positive will in the case of uh, uh, informing, dialoguing with, shaping the thought patterns and the nature of another human being. Um, if you would say to such a degree as to completely remove and override that human nature's choices at every point, I would not necessarily agree, if only because I don't think every human choice is for sin. I don't think every human choice is sinful, and I don't think you think that either. But I think that in the limit, um, it will be that we human beings, um, in discovering our true selves, we will be in perfect harmony with God, not sinning, and in that way also being theophanies ourselves in a very similar, if not identical, way to Jesus.
So I mean, we're getting to very fundamental things. Um, when it comes down to, I believe that the world is as it is. We live in a fallen and corrupt world. We have temptations. Sin is crouching at the door because that is part of God's divine order. That God created the evil inclination. God created Satan. God created and gave me a capacity to sin, and which gives me the capacity to, in fact, do his will. And what makes it meaningful for me to do God's will or to sin, as opposed to this incarnation of Jesus where he's Mary Sue. It's not even a worthwhile story. There it's the story of human being is tempted, decides to do what is right. That is the story of the entirety of the Hebrew Bible. And the fact that people like Moses and David and everybody else do miss the mark is what makes those stories valuable. Whereas Mary Sue Jesus is a story not worth telling.
Well, I mean, it seems to me like the point of the Jesus story, and there's going to be some stuff that I want to say in regard to the difference between positive will and permissive will. And in order to actually lay that out, I'm probably going to need at least 5 minutes of almost uninterrupted talking, but I'm not sure now is the time for that. But the point is that within Christian theology, you got your classical theism, where God is just like absolutely absolute, unlimitedly unlimited. Whenever we speak of him having intentional attitudes or emotions, those are more sort of like metaphors. And then you've got process theology, which is a little bit like theistic personalism, kind of like William Lane Craig's God, who got, he was really mad at the Canaanites when he told the Israelites to basically commit genocide against them. Or maybe you take issue with that characterization. I'm not
I
trying
do,
to.
but I mean,
Okay.
I'm
Well,
definitely
pardon me for that. Then when he told them to uproot them, I have a conception of the Trinity basically, which I think allows for God in an infinite sense, and God in a more finite sense, but not externally defined, more like self-defined, because outside him there is no greater reality. And then because my view of the infinite is that the infinite isn't just simply infinite, it's an interplay between the infinite and the finite. So my notion of the Trinity involves God in this more absolute sense, God in this more finite sense, but really in that sense, the sort of panpsychic mind of the cosmos, which still has a kind of internal, just as in your own consciousness, there's an internal, strictly internal definition or division between yourself and the otherness outside you. I imagine a similar thing can be occurring in the consciousness of the cosmos, assuming such a thing exists, again, in panpsychic terms. If your consciousness is something like the symphony of the workings of a number of different neurons, we may imagine if there is a consciousness associated with the symphony of, or in some cases, evil, namely the cacophony of, different real parts of reality working together. And within that consciousness, there might be a division between sort of that self, that kind of executive intelligence and the highest will that it purposes, and the sort of the chaos and the noise outside it, the other that it nonetheless identifies with and moves toward in love. Because I don't think that love is really like a finite aspect of reality. I know on one occasion, Joseph said to Luke that it essentializes God to say that God is love, because that's equating him with a finite aspect of reality. But when I see love, I see, the identification of the self with the other as other. And I see that kind of movement toward, it's the infinite identifying itself as infinite. And it's analogous to the union, say, of a predicate and its complement, which if you have X and not X, that is the unlimited, but it's dialectical. And it's, in a sense, instantaneous or fleeting. And the infinite is always like that. It's an interplay.
again,
But
I think you're falling into a you're I mean, God is love. So does that mean love is God?
rightly understood, perhaps, yeah, I think you could run it the other way too.
I think that's idolatry. That's why even the name of God, right? Even the very concept of God, right? Um, Judaism would say cannot contain God. It's it is impossible to. God is infinite. This world is finite, and
Well, I would
this
just here
attempt
draw the same distinction between the concept of love and love as one would between the concept of the infinite and the infinite.
the concept of love and love.
Yeah, in other words, the concept of the infinite is just as finite as anything else.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and
When
and
you
and so what
call
I'm
God
saying,
infinite,
so if you
that's
equate
yeah.
God with the concept of love, then okay, I grant that's a kind of idolatry, but just the same kind as to equate God with the concept of the infinite, as opposed to the infinite.
Yes. Yes. I mean, any name we give God, any attribute we assign to God, I would say, and I think classical Judaism would say, is um, is in fact idolatrous. Like we understand we understand what we can of God as a gift because it is revelation, right? God reveals himself in certain ways to us and in limited ways to us because we are incapable of grasping infinity. I mean, this is the whole concept of the shattering of the vessels. I don't know if you've heard of the shattering of the vessels, but this is it's the actual concept of the shattering, which is it is impossible for anything created to contain God. Yet the Christian story is somehow Jesus contained God.
Well, I don't know that. I mean, if the Christian story is that Jesus contains God exhaustively, and that the the divine nature in all its omnipotent omnipresence was contained exhaustively in um, the finite person of Jesus, then I guess I'm not a Christian because I don't believe that. But I'm not sure that Christianity is saying that. The What I was going to say is I don't believe God creates sin or evil. I think He allows it, but in the sense of if you like the second person of the Trinity, and my
Well, the
conception,
Bible says God creates evil. It
it does say
literally
that in the
says.
Hebrew Bible. It
Yeah.
does, and I don't read that particular verse literally. And I know you might say, well, why wouldn't you simply? No, but see, this goes back to what I said earlier and what we would inevitably get into. Why don't you simply read what the text says? Um,
No, no.
what is
How are you reading that text? I mean, you are. I presume you do have some deeper understanding. So, what is that deeper understanding of God saying, "I created all these things"?
God in the sense of the like say the first person of the Trinity on my own understanding of it is unlimited enough to encompass both good and evil, but that that sort of that unlimitedness um, it does not exhaust um, the infinite. If the infinite were truly infinite, it would also be finite. There's more to it than that. Um, and so I think there's a sense in which God is the ground of being, which is completely undifferentiated, and everything partakes of it, everything that exists, good and evil. There's another sense in which God is the highest sort of will of of the real universe. But see, God not in the sense of the physical universe, but the real universe, everything real, which on some level, it has to contain itself. In my view, the same way consciousness contains itself or takes itself as an argument, as a reflexive phenomenon. God, in the sense of the real universe, and it's the highest will, an executive intelligence, if you like, of that does not purpose sin or evil. It only allows it.
Right. So, I mean, we would say something similar, that evil is that which God creates in the way that you would throw something behind your back. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's further away from God. The and what is good is what is clearly showing God, and what is evil is what is more dark, right? Doesn't have as much light. And God's light is infinite. And in order for us to exist as anything other, as in order for us to have any sort of existence, God had to, in fact, kind of remove himself from the world, and that is the concept of tzimtzum, right? Of the constriction that had to come before creation. But with all of that, which we seem to agree with, how do we come back to the question of Jesus, who, as Mary Sue, is not even participating in all of that, right? He's yeah.
I'm not sure I have the same view as the Kabbalistic Tzimtzum. We can talk more about that, or we can talk more about Jesus. It's up to you.
I think we may have exhausted Jesus. I mean, I think we keep on coming back to the same idea, that for me, a human being who actually has the capacity to sin is in fact more the is in fact embodying God in the world and does not sin, is more embodying the world,
I think that's
God in the world,
exactly the
than somebody.
Orthodox conception of Jesus, though, that he had the capacity to sin and did not exercise it.
Okay, then how? Okay, then fine. Christianity, as you're describing it in this way, where Jesus is a human being who had the capacity to sin and just didn't. That's I don't see where the borderline between that and Judaism is.
Well, here's an interesting question. To do the will of God is does it consist in simply not doing certain things?
No,
Or
no. You have to do what God wants. Yeah.
that's right. In other words, what I'm saying is that one can, in some sense, do the will of God by merely refraining from, engaging in a number of sinful activities. But on another level, that's still too easy. And here's the question: are you sinning if you don't make the full use of your potential?
Yes.
But even if someone hasn't done certain sins, of whom can we really say that they made the absolute full use of their potential? That's
Nobody,
another.
because we're all finite.
Or maybe Jesus. That's the question. That's the
Well,
thing.
did he? I mean, obviously, what
He didn't accomplish much, did he? When you get right down to it.
that's actually the biggest question is, again, like, okay, you're telling me he
I
came
meant that
into the world and
ironically
he
for
didn't
my
sin.
Christian friends.
What?
I said I meant that ironically for my Christian friends.
What did he accomplish? What is so special about Jesus?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, you don't think that laying the foundation for essentially the biggest religion in the world, if I'm not mistaken, is.
Moses did that.
So most people are Jews?
Everybody who is a Christian traces their religion back to Moses. Everybody
so in the sense of laying the foundation. Well, Jesus did more. Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. And I'll say about I'll tell you what, my conception of what that means. Because the point of the Jesus story, where the rubber hits the road, is in its implication for action, its moral significance, i.e., its behavioral significance. Jesus is the ultimate moral example. Where God is love, Jesus is the ultimate moral example. If God were something other than love, he would not be, because if the point of, if God, say, if the ethic of ultimate reality was to make as much money as possible or be as victorious in war as possible, Jesus wouldn't instantiate that. But if, the ethic of ultimate reality is love, if that is what the infinite does, and if that is what the infinite is, then Jesus is the Son of God and is the ultimate moral example.
And so you live according to his example?
As much as possible, but I'm not really the best
Jesus
example.
recited the Shema twice a day. He wore phylacteries and tzitzit. He did not eat pork. He kept all of the commandments. Do you live to that? Do you even aspire to live to that?
Is love, is to embody maximal love, is that the same thing as to be a Jew, presuppositionally?
Well, the way you're describing it, by making Jesus perfect, any single human being, in fact, a male, right? It's idolatry in a very real sense. It's idolatry because you're reducing God to the life of this human being.
Well, I mean, if you say he's perfect, it raises the question of, in respect of what is he perfect? If to be perfect as Jesus was perfect is to be a Jew, I'm not sure that's what it was saying, because in other words, I don't think Jesus was the Son of God in respect of his flawless Judaism. I think he was the Son of God in the sense of the way that he embodied agape, the kind of the selfless love, the identification of the self with the other as other.
Then why didn't Jesus, in his capacity as God, just make the world perfect and heal everybody? And like you're saying, he did the maximum love, right? So why didn't
Why
he
doesn't
heal
God do
everybody?
that now?
What?
Why does not God do that now?
Good question. Why?
Good question,
I have
God.
my answer. I have perfect. Because we
Make
need
sure it's
to
not an
live.
answer that I can also use.
We No, it's not, because you say that God was perfectly embodied in the world. I say that God cannot be perfectly embodied in the world.
No. The question is, if God can set everything to rights right now in a way that will truly make everything perfect, why doesn't he do so?
First of all, Sherry, no, Jesus did not harvest on the Sabbath, even according to the Christians. But because this is a fallen world, that's why. Because God is not perfectly embodied in this world, that's why it's a fallen world. And it needs to be, in order for us to have free will. That's the
my answer
reason for
too.
creation.
Then that's my answer too.
Except you said that God was perfectly
embodied in Jesus, not in the world.
So
it's the same claim to say that he's perfectly embodied in Jesus. That's the same claim as to say that he's perfectly embodied in the entire world. The entire world is a reflection of his positive will.
If when God,
I'm asking if you're saying those are the same claims, because you seem to be saying that.
Yeah, because if God is fully, like, if a person is actually the Messiah, then he actually accomplishes what he's trying to do, right? Like he would, in fact, everybody would repent and everybody would, in fact, do exactly what.
Does that happen at the point of the sword, or does that happen through metanoia? Does that happen through tshuva? Does that happen through everyone's free participation?
Free participation, because God is not perfectly. That's why God is not perfectly represented in the world.
I didn't say that. I said he was in Jesus.
If Jesus is perfectly representing God in the world, then God is being perfectly represented inside the world, right?
But not in the world in its entirety. Yes, inside the world, not in the world in its entirety. The entire world is not there a symbol for God and the expression of his positive will in every respect.
But God is unlimited, right?
In a sense, yes.
What do you mean in a sense? Isn't being unlimited an important part of being God?
Yes.
Then how did Jesus embody that?
How did he embody the unlimitedness of God?
Yeah.
Well, in the
The
sense of
infinite capacity of God.
Well, in the sense of, yeah, the unlimitedly unlimited. I told you, earlier that no, he is limited, so he's not being that.
Okay, so he's not a perfect embodiment of. He's not a perfect representation of God in the world.
Well, no, he is a perfect representation of God's positive will. But the positive will of God is not perfectly unlimited. It's a limited thing.
So God, in his full capacity, can heal the whole world, right? See, this is the thing. Okay, I think it is impossible for God to be even in one tiny bit of the world perfectly represented in the world, because that would negate the world itself.
That's very
Creation, like Tzimtzum, was necessary.
Let's pause. Give me 1 second to take a break, and then we'll come back to this. This is very interesting and important, I sense.
Okay. You take a break. I am going to go back to the comments here. Okay. How far back? Has God always had emotions? No. God does not have emotions. God represents himself through emotions. I don't think you can rightly name love. God is love, but you can't say love is God for this reason. In other words, we don't have a grasp of on the essence. Correct. No, I agree with you, definitely. That's to Dominic, and that's back to him. Christ embodies the God is love idea, and this is the only way it can be understood. I don't understand it like as embodied. The only way love can be understood is as embodied. Okay, then why just Jesus? Again, it comes back to the question of how is this Jesus idea? Like, where are you no longer describing Genesis 1? God withdrew from Christ 2, then he's not. I thought even Jesus, the God man, could sin. I think that's what people say. But if that's true, why was he born of a virgin? What does that even matter? Smuggles a word of he was the Son of God because he was a true human being. He was the Son of God because he was a true human being. Okay. So we're back to Genesis 1. Where's the Christianity here? God tries to leave enough space in the world so we can mess it up. Yes, that is the concept of Simpson. I've been watching for about 3 to 4 minutes and I'm already stressed out. Isn't the world a retraction of God's being? Yes, I would say yes. Again, I mean, I really don't understand where this concept of Christianity, where Jesus is actually a human being, and his divineness is in the fact that he does the will of God, is in any way distinguishable from Judaism. And I think ultimately it nullifies the Christianity. Yeah, you're back. Your microphone's off. There you go.
Okay, should be back.
Okay.
Well, I
Where
think
were we? What were we talking?
you were saying that if God were fully embodied, say in
Fully.
any part or aspect of reality, that would mean he was fully embodied in every part or aspect, if I'm understanding you correctly.
If he was fully embodied in any, if he was revealed completely in any, like, if even one point actually completely was completely revealing God, right? That point would annihilate everything around it, because everything around it would just come undone by the greatness of God. That's why the Tzimtzum was necessary. That's why the constriction was necessary. The veil exists so that we may also exist. Without that veil, we would cease to be.
Could that unlimitedness actually exist?
Say that again. Could that?
What you're talking about, could it happen in any meaningful sense ever?
It happens all the time. That's my thing. Like, again, you are made in the image of God. You embody God in the world. When you do God's will, you embody God. You are a revelation of God in the world.
That's not me being like this point of completely unlimited, like,
It's not.
I don't believe so.
You when it,
If
well
if I
in,
if I
in
do if I embody God's will, then suddenly the entire cosmos is redeemed in its entirety in such a way that nothing can exist. Actually, I'm
no
just
no no no
not
no
following.
no. Okay, so we have the veil, right? We have that
What I'm asking is whether the veil can ever actually come up.
completely.
Yeah, or
But
at all.
so things do reveal God in the world
So you're saying it can
in
come up a
limited way.
little bit, but not completely.
Not completely, not until the coming of the Messiah. No.
Oh, no, so it can.
Well, when the Messiah comes, the veil will be lifted.
Got it. But then nothing can exist?
Not being separate from God. Yeah, that's part of. I mean, so this is part of the idea of there is the veil, right? It's not like we believe. Well, at least in Hasidic philosophy, it's not like we believe that it is actually possible for anything to exist which is not doing the will of God. It's possible for us to choose, because of the veil, to choose that we don't want to do what God wants. And in response to that, God creates. So Cain decided he wants to kill Abel. Cain was able to kill Abel because God willed that. We don't see that because we don't see why and how God's will does that, because of that's what we don't see. What exists ultimately is all, but right now we don't see that, so that we may in fact have choice. Does that make sense?
To an extent, I think I can see what you're saying, but it does make me wonder, first of all, if you're saying that God wills every act of evil that occurs.
I'm sorry, connection problems. And
Yeah, we are having connection problems.
one more time.
Yeah, again, connection permitting. I think I can begin to take a perspective that is like the one you're laying out, but as a preliminary question, I want to know if you are saying that God doesn't merely allow, God did not merely allow Cain to kill Abel. He willed Cain to kill Abel. Is that correct or no?
Okay, again, we had the hopefully.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe third time is a charm. I'm saying that what you're saying,
I'm saying that the result of Cain's choice were God, God, because it was the best thing that could exist given Cain's choice.
and I still miss the part, because what I'm trying to ask is, when Cain killed Abel, did God allow that or did he will that?
Abel's death was God's will.
Okay.
Nobody dies. Nobody dies. Like, thing to say that a human being can trust. It's a different thing to say that someone's life ends without God's will.
Okay, we're still being dogged by connection problems. I want to, because you say the death of Cain was the will of God, and there we can still split hairs and talk about a permissive will and the positive will. And let me ask you at this point, was that his permissive will or his positive will?
Positive will. I would say
okay.
That the actual death has to. It's not actual death cannot be permissive, because God is who chooses who lives and dies. The fact that Abel actually died must come from God.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is every evil act that occurs, is that God's positive will, or only those evil acts that result in someone's life being taken?
Everything that actually occurs is part of God's will.
Is the positive will of God?
Yes, everything that occurs, everything that actually happens. So evil happens as a response to our choices, because being able to see the evil, right? If we lived in a world where God did not allow evil to happen, we would not have the capacity to choose evil.
But he allows it to happen, or he positively wills it? See, I'm missing this part.
Okay. If I lived in a world where no evil happened, right? If I decided to kill someone, I died and that person did not, there would be no way of choosing to do evil. If Cain was killed and Abel was resurrected immediately, which is not what happens in the Bible, right? So justice would have been, when God comes, instead of asking Abel what you did, God would say, hey, you killed Abel, resurrect Abel, kill Cain.
So
That's not what happens.
I have a similar view to you, except the way I would say it is that God allowed Abel's death, but did not positively will it. He did not purpose it.
So why didn't he resurrect Abel?
Well, I mean, that raises the question of whether divine intervention at every point would allow the kind of existence that we are here to learn from, essentially. It also raises the question of, if divine intervention were to occur in every case, would that solve everything, or would that simply create a new set of resulting, say,
let's
problems and tensions?
let's take a slightly different example. Um, there are children who are born with horrible diseases. Would you agree that their pain and suffering is evil?
Evil. Yeah, I guess it's natural evil.
Um, who created those diseases?
I would say that God allowed them to exist.
But God didn't create them?
That's not reflecting his primary purpose in creation.
Okay, it's not reflecting his primary purpose because, and I would say, because God creates things in the world in response to our choices. When I choose to do evil, it pollutes the world with that evil, right? And so, but that pollution, including the diseases that little children suffer, that natural evil is the natural response, God's way of dealing of creating the world so that I may realize good causes good, evil causes evil, and I should choose good.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're in any disagreement there. I would just
Okay.
characterize the evil that happens in this world as, again, something God allows rather than, purposes.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree that God's so in the Hebrew expressions, it is whether it is forward or backward, right? If 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 God is making it happen in a straightforward manner or in a backward manner, right? If it's the face of God or the back of God, right? So the priestly blessing, right? God should shine his countenance upon you, right? So that you should be able to see God from the front as opposed to from the back like Moses did.
That's very interesting. I'll have to think more about that. I think the original reason why we came to this set of questions was that I did say that I felt that God's positive will was fully embodied in Jesus. Um, uh, but not but I mean, if what one means by that is his positive will for the entire, say, cosmos, such that it has to be free of evil right then and there, then no, I don't mean that. I mean that his positive will was embodied in Jesus, in a more restricted way, just in the actions that Jesus himself performed. Now, it sounds to me like you're saying that if anyone were to do that, if anyone were to fully embody the positive will of God in sort of my sense, um, then you think that everything would actually also have simultaneously to be embodying or
Well,
expressing that positive will.
okay, so let's take what I would say is the ultimate of of human beings embodying God's will, which is man and wife coming together at one flesh, creating another human being, right? That I would say is the ultimate, the highest form of actually embodying the will of God in the world. Okay, and because ultimately it is a human being is actually composed of the male and female coming together, right? So primordial Adam was androgynous, was male and female. Okay, so that is the ultimate embodiment of godliness in the world, and that's why it results in what is the most holy in the world, which is birth of a human being. Okay? It is limited, and its results are limited because this world is still a fallen world. And so that those two, well, that one human being really is, in fact, perfectly, I would say, at that moment, embodying God in the world. At the same time, the results of that are limited because the world continues to be fallen. And if it were to be perfectly perfect and unlimited, then yes, the world would be perfected.
If by
and the
perfection,
scale would be.
if by perfection you mean like completely unlimited, then I'm not claiming that of Jesus either.
Right. So again, it comes back to, how is Jesus different from everybody else? Like, okay, you're
Jesus
telling
would
me
be that
he
person
chose to
who,
do God's will. Great. Lots of human beings do that all the time. They may not do it for their entire life, but that's not a qualitative difference. That's a quantitative difference.
oh, I'm saying Jesus is that person who did choose to do God's will at every choice point, and not merely in the sense of refraining to perform certain sinful activities, because there's a whole bevy of sins that neither you nor I have committed, despite.
That's why
But
I spoke
but
about
also
positively, like having a child.
but also in the sense of having met his full potential, not committing sins of commission, but not committing sins of omission either. It's a
Well,
very,
he didn't get married and have children. That's the first commandment in the book.
again, if you're going to say that the standard by which he is to be judged is a certain reading or understanding of the Hebrew Bible, then yes, by definition, Jesus cannot be
Certain.
perfect by that.
What's your reading of the Hebrew Bible, which doesn't include a commandment for a man to get married?
So this is, again, getting back to what I said we would inevitably get into.
Right.
Here's the text. Here's its plain meaning. How
It's,
can you?
give me your meaning. I'm not. So this is. I find okay. It's, we're not debating hermeneutics. You're just telling me, oh, that's not my understanding. You're not telling me what your understanding. So what is your understanding of the text in which it isn't a commandment for every man to get married? Like, what is your your deeper or metaphoric or whatever understanding?
Well, I don't claim to have an understanding of every verse in the Bible. If you think about it, to say that, oh no, I have a fantastic understanding of every verse in the Bible, no
This
one
is
can honestly.
Genesis 1. We're not talking every verse in the Bible. We're talking Genesis 1.
So, again, I'm just going to stand by what I said. I'm not going to claim that because I don't. Now, regarding the commandment to be fruitful and multiply,
Right.
I would interpret that as at least something which most people should do. I don't know why it should be understood as a blanket or categorical commandment. All doesn't always mean all. Not that the word all is in there, but do you see what I'm saying?
Well, do you agree that the most perfect way to embody that commandment is for a man to get married and have children?
I don't think that I see the Hebrew Bible as inspired in the same way that you do. Because it seems to me like you're saying that the highest morality would be to do the words of this book, as written, at least according to a certain interpretation, which nonetheless seems to follow pretty straightforwardly from the text.
You
But I'm saying that the highest
say
morality
a certain interpretation. I'm saying any interpretation. Fine, give me your interpretation. But,
I did.
and I asked you, so your interpretation is it that the most perfect, the way in way to in fact embody that, if I'm living my life according to the Bible as you interpret it, would it would should I go get married?
So the most perfect way to embody that commandment is to embody it. The most perfect way to embody, say, the highest morality is not necessarily to embody that commandment. On my view, I have a different understanding of, say, divine morality than I think you have. Because again,
No, I actually think we agree. So if somebody is living their life doing other commandments and living their life completely trying to understand the Bible in its entirety, and for that person it doesn't allow, and in fact that's what I think Jesus means when he talks about people who have become eunuchs for the sake of heaven, right? uh, but I think we completely agree with that. Where I am trying, the point I'm trying to make is the way you're describing Jesus and his life isn't a perfect embodiment that of even what you would say is the Old Testament law.
well, correct. I don't think he perfectly embodied the Old Testament law, at least not as read in a certain way. If you read it,
Your way. I'm not saying a certain way. Your way.
my way is to see God, as ultimately love. And
Okay.
so, you know, to embody the highest morality is to embody self-sacrificial love, or agape.
So Jesus could have asked Mary Magdalene to marry him.
So you need to do
I'm
that
sure
in
she would
order
say
to
yes.
embody. Do you need to do that in order to embody agape?
It seems to me like it would, within the context of the story, within the context of Jesus being an embodiment of love, and right. I if this is the perfect story, like Jonathan Pajot keeps on saying, right? Seems to me that the perfect story would have the hero marry the princess at the end, right?
No, I simply don't share that intuition that it must necessarily happen. I just don't understand.
Um, in in your hierarchy of good, right? Right. So um, let's let's talk about an absolutely different story. I'm walking down the street to go buy something and come back. I trip, right? It, as a hierarchy of values, right? Would it be better for me not to trip in that story or to trip?
Well,
I'm,
let's
I'm
see.
asking about your hierarchy of values. Like, you have a hierarchy of values that A is better than B,
Yeah,
right?
all else equal, it's better not to trip.
It's better not to trip. Okay. All else equal, would it have been better for Jesus to get married or not get married?
That's an interesting question. I don't know the answer, and I don't know if all else was equal either. So
Oh, yeah. There's definitely the argument, and I would make the argument that all else wasn't equal, but partially because I see Jesus as a human being of very finite capacity, and I see him as a human being just like any other human being, right? So for me, the idea that Jesus lived his life and he only did things to the extent that he in a limited form was capable to makes perfect sense. And I would say he could have been a very good person, as well as many other people are very good people, including David and Moses and Joseph and all the other saints of the Bible, and in fact saints all over the place. But that's because I don't place Jesus in this super ordinal position that, for example, Pajot does, of saying that his life was the perfect life.
Well, see, in some sense, this is what's interesting, is in order to evaluate who truly led the perfect life, it seems to require a great deal of, I don't know, I want to say empirical knowledge. There, there so much of what makes an action right or wrong in the world depends on things that most of us can't actually know. It may, in some sense, actually be better to trip on the way to the store, because that actually, in a way that you didn't realize, prevents you from getting hit by a bus or something like that. And so I think that in regard to whether he did lead that perfect life, there's one answer in which I have to answer, I don't know. Just as I also have to answer, did he rise from the dead? I actually don't know. I wasn't there. I don't think I have the kind of evidence to say that I know that for sure. Although when it comes to claims of like knowing stuff for sure, you always have to sort of implicitly set the evidence bar there, because there's a bunch of stuff I do know if the evidence bar is set way low, but a lot of even really basic stuff that I don't know if you set the evidence bar high enough.
Well, this is the idea of the coming of the Messiah. When the Messiah comes, right, the earth will be covered with knowledge as water covers the seas. And the new covenant will happen, where it shall no longer be necessary for man to teach man, right? And all of that perfection and our way of looking back at the world and understanding why God does all the things that he does, and in fact, being able to see all the things that God tells Job you're not able to see, that is the perfection of the coming of the Messiah, which will happen when the Messiah does come. But we live in a fallen world where we are not able to see how tripping, in fact, does improve the world. Because I believe that I trip because God wills it, because it is what is best for me. Go ahead.
Well, see, what I would say is, on some level, I am in the position of having to take it on faith that the way that Jesus lived his life was in some sense the perfect way. I don't actually know. I'm not in the position of being able to see that, oh yeah, in hindsight, tripping was good. So that's kind of my existential situation, is that I'm actually in a situation of having to test out something which is not demonstrated with all the certainty that we would like.
Why is it important? Let's say that one night Jesus, in fact, did fail, and he sinned, and he had sex with somebody he shouldn't have, and the rest of his life he was perfect. And in fact, the next day he repented, and he repented fully. How does that diminish Jesus?
It's an excellent question. In some sense, I don't think he's as ultimate a moral example in that case as if he had not. And my view
I
of
think
Jesus
the
is
opposite. I think the absolute opposite. That in fact, David, who is the prototype of the Messiah, at his sinning and repentance, in fact, makes him an even more perfect embodiment of God in the world.
I see David as a very useful moral example, but I can't see him as the ultimate moral example, is I think the difference. Or maybe you're not claiming he's the ultimate moral example either.
I'm claiming he's a better moral example than Mary Sue Jesus.
Well, I mean, if I'm to aim at something which was less than perfect, I don't really see that as good as aiming at perfection. I don't know, and maybe I'm very literal minded.
And it's not a question of literal minded. It's a question of the story, right? The story which is actually instructive to us as human beings in our lives, right? David, um, David is not the perfect moral example for Uriah's family.
Yeah,
I disagree. I completely disagree. In fact, I think that it's there's a reason why David is in the Bible, is because it's a compelling and necessary story. And whereas Mary Sue David, right, a David who never sinned, would not be worthy of being an actual story, because it would have no relationship to me. It would be just another angel. Like, how is that a good story? How is that a good story, as in something that is valuable for me to learn from, that somebody was completely perfect and never sinned, never had to repent, never really experienced life as I do.
I do feel like I understand what you're saying, but it also comes out sounding to me like if I can't actually reach this example, then I shouldn't even try. And I'm not sure that the conclusion follows from the premise.
I'm not saying I shouldn't try. I'm saying that, like the Bible says, the righteous man falls 7 times and rises up. And that the commandment to repent is one of the commandments which is given to all human beings. And that's why we do trip, why God does, in fact, why God created sin crouching at the door, so that we can, in fact, learn and improve and become more godly through our repentance and sanctification and purification.
That's very interesting, because if you say that God created sin crouching at the door in order to bring about some good, that's an interesting expression, because I'm not sure that I would use that myself, because I don't think that God uses evil in any kind of instrumental sense like that. I think that evil is always, whatever good results from evil is always incidental to uh, whatever good God had in mind in just allowing evil, namely the
So,
freedom.
so why did
But
God create the concept of evil?
I think that the concept of evil exists necessarily. I'm not even sure I would say it was created, out of some materia prima. I think if there's good, then there's also evil.
So, I think God actually created good and evil, like it says in Isaiah, and I
Just what it
think
says.
and I think God created light and darkness, like it says in Genesis, and I think the very concept of there being darkness was necessary in order for us to have. So the the Hebrew
See, I
word,
actually agree with you on this,
yeah,
but you're going to have to allow me to split hairs a little bit here,
okay,
because one does not have to create the complement to some predicate in order for that, predicate to be possible as a descriptor. I don't
because
have to
God has
create.
a face, God also has a back.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that, and because light exists, darkness exists simultaneously. It's not created in sequence with it or as
And
a necessary
because
condition for it.
and
It's if
and
one exists and then there's the other. This is a, in logic, it would have to be a biconditional relationship. There's no speaking of one without the others. There's no question of doing this that the other may be. No,
and
they
and because no man may see the face of God and live, Moses saw the back of God.
I guess you have to
Do
forgive me
you
for
see the analogy?
not fully.
Okay, so good is the face of God, and darkness or evil is the back of God. And because no man can see the face of God, can see just pure good and live and be a separate thing and actually have free will and choice in the world, Moses saw the back of God.
So, it's just I'm not entirely sure how what you said refutes what I'm about to say, but I guess what I'm saying is that I don't see that God had to create darkness, um, at least not as an additional step from creating light. If there was light, then there was also darkness instantaneously and inseparably. Um, so I don't really see God as having to sort of go out of his way to create dualities. I think that dualities always are, as an entailment of the infinite being what it is.
Well, Sherry seems to disagree with you. She says
Sherry
duality was
disagrees with me on a
created.
lot of things.
Um,
Interestingly, when she disagrees with me, she sounds more Kabbalistic. So
yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
that you're doing your job.
everything she's saying, I in fact do agree with. I think duality did need to be created because
I think
originally
it's
God,
uncreated. I
what?
don't think I think it's uncreated. I don't think there's any sense that can be made of the notion of the infinite existing all by itself. If God is pure oneness, oneness of what? He has to be a oneness of qualities which are yet distinct.
Um,
Otherwise, oneness has no meaning.
so I think everything was in fact created, and so even so I guess it kind of goes. I'm asking one more why than you are. Is um, why does why does light have to imply darkness? Couldn't God create light without darkness?
No, see, that's analytically impossible. Because if there's no darkness, then there's nothing that it means for something to be light.
Okay, no, I understand that. Why did God create light and darkness in that manner? That one is opposed to the other. Why couldn't God create the world in a world where the analysis is different than what you say is analytically impossible?
Yeah, because you can't break logic like that. You can't just say in a world where logic doesn't exist,
Why
in a
not?
world where 2 + 2 is 5.
Um, so I think we can ask. I'm not asking in a world where logic doesn't exist. I'm asking why does logic exist?
Logic exists because contradiction exists. This gets into the nature of the infinite. The infinite is an interplay between the infinite and the finite. There's the absolute, the unlimited, x and not x, and then there's the law of non-contradiction. There's either x or not x. These two presuppose each other, and
Right.
they are interdefined, and they're always together as part of the infinite being what it is.
And my belief is that there was God. Shari says, I think I might be Jewish. You might be a Noahide. In fact, I think you are. Um, I, that um, I agree with you that these things exist and they necessarily include the other. For me, the answer for why, and I do believe there is an answer for why is that God as creator, right? In order to be a creator, there needed to be a created, right? And God's very nature was to create. And so he created this interplay between the finite and infinite. And the very concept of finitude, I guess. Um, and that is what we mean by tzimtzum.
Well, see, that's very interesting because it sounds to me like you're saying that before duality was, there was just absolute flat monism.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is, what does it mean to say that that monism was? Where the word was is used, what is its meaning when you say that it existed?
So, uh, okay, part of it
Because it
has
was
to
not a
be
thing which could be, perceived,
so,
nor something
right.
which can be understood in terms of essentially spatio-temporal, i.e.,
So,
causal relations.
right. So one of the names we have for God is Makom, which means place, and we call God the place because He is the place within which the world exists. He is the canvas
Yeah, so
upon
he's a
which the
place as
world.
opposed to something which isn't a place. I want to understand what it means when you say that God, in his essential non-dual oneness, existed. I want to know the meaning of the word existed when it's predicated of something which is fundamentally, supposedly, um,
Well,
illimitable.
right. So I completely understand the question and the problem. I agree with you. And what I would say is ultimately that's what it means. God is ineffable, and you're reaching to the limits of our finitude, right? But my turtles all the way down is God's ineffability, right? So I I believe that there was this monism which was before duality, but you can take that one level down and say, well, what was before that? And my answer would be that which is completely ineffable, which is beyond anything I could absolutely actually say.
And that's interesting because, the infinite does have this dialectical logic. If you have infinity, it's known qua infinity or as infinity in distinction to finitude. But that means that if you have this opposition, there's some more fundamental medium, which is like the true infinity. And once you spot that, it's like, okay, I pull that up, make that the new infinite. What was previously infinite is now the finite. But then once again, you have another infinite, right? So I do agree that the infinite has this fundamentally dynamic nature. Um, as far as like this completely non-dual thing existing before any duality was, I assume that when these words are used, they mean something. But you're telling me you can't tell me what they mean, which I suppose is fine. Um, but like that's just me being a little bit maybe simple-minded again. But
No,
I
no,
just
it's
I
not.
just assume that
It's
words
not
have
simple.
meaning.
No, no, no. It's not being simple-minded. Yosef joined us. Meta existence, or as Levinas entitled his book, "Otherwise Than Being Beyond Essence." Um, I think I hear what you're saying. I completely hear what you're saying.
To me,
And
I
my
would
answer,
subscribe to a view more like eternal generation, simply because there is no making sense of a time before time or a completely
no.
what?
So
Hmm?
so yeah, there is no sense. There is no sense. So because God is infinite, I know that it is in fact beyond me. In fact, there is something that is beyond anything I can say, and that any words I use are that there is a point at which any word that I use, and that's why I use G dash D, right? Because obviously you understand when I say G, when I write G dash D, you understand I'm saying God. So what am I doing there, right? Isn't that I'm just representing another representation of a representation of the name of God? No, what I'm saying with G dash D, what the fact that we don't even say the tetragrammaton at all, right? That we simply just do not say it at all is a recognition of what you're saying. That yes, at some point we just fail, and that's fine because we're finite. He's infinite, and That's to be expected.
But
That
it
is
does.
the ineffable.
It also sounds like almost an admission that it's not correct on some level to say that he existed.
Yeah,
You're
you're right.
granting that the word exist was not the right word, but not really being. Um, you're not really finding a more appropriate word ready to hand.
So
And
so
on
you
some
do
level,
know
I
that
appreciate the predicament.
you do know that the tetragrammaton is actually a form of the verb to be in Hebrew.
No, I didn't know that.
And it is, and variously, I mean, also God says ehiyah asher ehiyah. That is also a form of to be, and it's actually in the imperfect, right? That in the incomplete action. And part of the ineffable nature of the tetragrammaton is in fact that it is beyond existence and being. And yeah, we don't say it at all.
It's interesting to me when people talk about the being beyond being as distinct from regular old being, as if there could be an absolute duality there between, whereas in fact, to speak of
Again,
one,
aren't you? I hope you see why I write G-D as opposed to God.
you might be placing too much faith in my ability to make very abstract connections, but I am at
Okay,
least.
okay. So the word God, right? God is referring to God, right? Correct, right?
Uh,
You would agree with
uh,
that?
sure, but I mean, even the way you use God, it's not referring to God. So, like on some level, I'm still at sea.
So I use G-D not because it doesn't also refer to God, just like God does, but because it refers to God and it says that it is an imperfect reference to God. The fact that it is an imperfect reference to God, in fact, makes it a better representation of the concept of God than to write God.
That's a pretty good. That's a very insightful way to frame it, I think.
I mean, it goes back to the idea of the ineffable and the tetragrammaton, and the fact we never say it. We simply we don't even pronounce the tetragrammaton, because to pronounce it would like fundamentally change the the nature of being. And this is a very ancient idea. This isn't something I'm bringing. Like this goes back at least to the time of Jesus.
It would fundamentally change the nature of being in such a way as to make it perhaps the being beyond being, something radically distinct and alien from being.
I
But then
don't know.
again, oh,
I
what?
don't know. I don't know. And I don't think it's possible for a human being to know. This is why I have my background. This is like that's why this so you're not going to be able to hear me when I show the background. So I'm just going to show it for a second, but I want to show it. So that background, right? The tetragrammaton, which is the ineffable name of God, which in some way is the essence and how God created us, that you can see in that image of, right, the letters actually, like, there is the shape of humanity, right? At the same time, it's ineffable. That is a word you, yes, there are letters there. You can't say it. You it is beyond, and that is a real sense of infinity, which is infinity beyond infinity. Like it's actual infinity. And yes, you're it is recursive, and it needs to be recursive in order to for it to be infinite.
Yeah, I think that's what God is, and I think that we partake of His nature in that respect. I think that all of us are like that, and I think that with every time we, if you like, self-configure, every time that we choose to change our state, by coupling like the state of our body and mind with something else, some new value, that's almost like an act of self-identification. And that's almost like the finite predicate or self that you are, reaching out to what it perceives as its complement or other, uh, that will make it infinite. And that's why, like, every value is a kind of identity, and every false value is a false identity on my view. And so there's like the true self that you are is more integrated with, say, everyone else whom you know. And when you act in a way that people describe as selfless, in a way it's it's more consonant with your true self, because you to understand the way in which your extended self encompasses many relationships. In fact, in the limit, it encompasses as many relationships as there are, which, um, on some level, is God. God, in the sense that I use it in my sort of second person of the Trinity. Because, to speak of God as the being of everything that exists is not really to place him outside, say, of creation, unless you insist that.
Just a second, Cal. Sherry, secular Coranism is Claire Kaw. She's just a troll. Don't. Yeah. Keep on going, Cal. But
Secular,
and yes,
secular Quranism for Europeans?
yeah. This is a particular person named Claire Kaw, who's she's a postmodern artist, and she creates. She has this persona, which it's actually very interesting, but and I I allow her to mess around here, but uh, yeah, I have a 5-hour video. Who is Claire Kaw? I do not necessarily recommend watching it, and it makes me sound like a conspiratorial nut. But the fact she's omnipresent, she's available for more than 24/7. That's the thing. She like shows up for everything. I, I think she's a persona created by some organization, which is really interesting. But like, she actually is the bot that people talk about on the internet. That's like trying to influence people.
Yeah, or the glowing Fed, as it's sometimes put. But I guess the question is, why aren't you just a humble insurance broker with a
Right. So
theology?
this is the thing. So it's really interesting. Okay, we're getting way off this, and
It's okay. I
what
don't really have the brain power for abstruse theology anymore. I'm actually kind
well
of hitting my
what
limit there.
I just want to say what you were saying. Like there's so much in Hasidic thought that
Yes,
reflects what you were saying,
yes.
that honestly I think if you were to dig into it, your mind would be blown. But
And the
back to
forelocks
Claire Kaw.
they would just grow of their own accord. They would flow lusciously from my temples.
I'm not sure about that. Again, I don't
It
think
takes
you
it
have to
takes
be a
curly
Jew.
hair to grow a good pair of forelocks. Maybe
I
mine isn't curly enough.
I do want to I do believe in creating a Hasidic Christianity. I that is one of my goals. But as far as Claire, so I'm not sure. I Have you heard of the Cybernetic Research Unit?
No.
Very few people have. And the fact that it was an actual thing is what I think helps people understand that I'm not just crazy. Yes, I am crazy, but I'm not just crazy when I say, like, she's a persona created by a group of people to in order to um, affect the dialogue. So I watch the people she interacts with, because what I have found is she she or they, and I do believe it's at least three or four people, probably more, who run this personality. They go around identifying really smart people on the right and sabotaging them. And one of the things she was capable. Have you heard of E. Michael Jones? So your microphone's off. Um,
I keep taking it off just in case there's some kind of noise.
okay. Yeah.
But I have heard of him. Because he's the Catholic guy, right?
Right. Yes.
Right. And there's also Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy, who I think is not so controversial.
Oh, I don't.
Um,
I don't know him, but E. Michael Jones is probably the most prolific and capable anti-Semite in the world. I think he is the biggest proponent of active anti-Semitism, certainly in English-speaking world right now, as far as I know it. Right, an actual proponent. Like, I'm not talking about Nick Fuentes and David Duke and all the people that, like, um, mainstream media will platform. I'm talking about somebody who's actually a convincing proponent of anti-Semitism. And Claire actually is the only person I've seen humiliate E. Michael Jones. She got 2 interviews with him, and in both of them, she was able to maneuver him into saying things that alienate his audience. She is definitely the most brilliant person I have ever encountered. I've spoken to her several times. She's come on my channel. I've gone on her channel.
do you,
Uh,
is there a, like, when people talk to Claire, um, are the cameras on? Is there like a face there?
so that's the thing.
No.
So she usually does not have the camera on, and she claims it's because she doesn't want to do her makeup and people don't want to see her and bullshit like that. No, and in fact, that's my requirement. I won't let her on my channel unless the camera's on, because then I can see at least I'm talking to one person at a time. Because when I was just talking to her avatar, like, she runs mental circles around me, and uh, in ways that, like, it's like, I'm a pretty smart person. Like, I can hold my own with people who are much smarter than me. The person Claire Kaw is a member of the bar in England, so she's a trained lawyer, and I I really think she's the front for some sort of organization, because she is on more than 24 hours a day. Like, she's on the internet more than 24 hours a day, and she identifies, like, some of the most intelligent people I have encountered has been by watching who Claire is trying to sabotage and getting in contact with them and talking to them. But she is really good at sabotaging people on the right. She does an incredible job of sabotaging right wing discussion on the internet. I kind of feel like I have encountered a solid example of the enemy functioning. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm hesitant to make like um, uh, any kind of definitive judgments about Claire when I don't know anything about her myself, aside from what you've just told me, and especially not when she's right here monitoring us. Hi, Claire. Um, uh, but I mean, that certainly sounds. I mean, there's definitely strange things afoot on the internet these days, and
The
I don't.
Cybernetic Research Institute was a real thing. A unit was a real thing. You can go and read their Wikipedia article and stuff. There have been projects to do precisely what I think Claire is doing. Now, I might be wrong. I'm always willing to admit I might be wrong. Maybe she really is somehow this, um, out of work yet qualified attorney in England who is omnipresent. Um, and she spends all her time like saying a lot of crazy things at the same time, like drunken master, like the drunken master idea of karate, right? That there's this guy who's like he's like this drunk, and all these karate masters come, and like by falling down he kind of trips them up. Maybe she really is this drunken master of verbal jujitsu. I don't believe it. She is I think she is one of the most brilliant people, and I believe she has a whole organization behind her. And I think, yeah, you're getting tired. I can tell.
Yeah, the problem is I kind of already was tired at the start. I woke up at about 4 this morning, and
Okay.
I did fall back asleep, but it was just it was real rough. Uh, and I was up at 6 or 7. I mean, I know I was dreaming, but it didn't feel like I was sleeping.
Okay.
And that's just kind of, I think, that low quality sleep is part of my sleep disorder, and that's kind of inconsistent. Some days are good, some days are bad. I thought that I actually had the kind of interchange with you that I wanted to have, which would be not to be, there's I didn't want to interrupt you, or have it be just two of us talking over each other.
I
So
don't think we were. I hoped
no,
we
I
were.
know, and that also means, in a sense, I wasn't being, as assertive as I might be in another conversation. But I think that, which is also fine, because it depends on whom you're talking to, and it depends on what you're talking about. And if you have someone with whom you have, at least superficially, profound disagreements, then sometimes it's there's a certain way that you want to just kind of rein yourself in, because otherwise there's going to be more, what is the expression, more heat than light. So
Right.
I thought we had more light than heat, and
I
I
hope so.
I think we did. I thought it was really good, and in fact, if you don't mind, well, because it's going to be on YouTube, you said, and then I can get the audio for my
Yeah,
podcast.
it is. It's already on YouTube. It's already on my channel. And it'll actually also be on Twitch. Mm, because of StreamYard, I really like StreamYard. They actually do also keep a record and stuff. So if you want a higher quality thing of a recording of it, then YouTube, I can get you that if you would like. But yeah,
Well, then, I can just catch you next time, and it was really great. Next time we can talk about, maybe we should get Yosef in here next time. We can talk about, Jesus as Pharisee, the important commonalities between Jesus and the Pharisaic tradition, and the sayings of, like, I don't know, Hillel predated Jesus, correct?
by very little. So
Right.
the
And then
discussion that was
Akiva
being had
post-dated
in
Jesus, right?
what?
Akiva post-dated Jesus,
Oh
correct?
yes.
Right. And so, but this kind of these liberal rabbis, especially Hillel, whom Jesus resembles in certain respects and then in others doesn't. It's an extremely interesting question when you try to almost trace the
So
almost like the rabbinic
Wikipedia
genealogy of Jesus.
Wikipedia gives the date of death of Hillel as the year 10. So um, theoretically, it's possible that Jesus met Hillel. I actually, so in my weird beliefs, I have some very strange beliefs. I'm actually, I'm hoping maybe to write a book. It's, I'm hoping, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but about like explaining my beliefs. But in my weird beliefs, I believe at least some of the people we refer to as Jesus lived before Hillel. I think Jesus was
I think it's sort of
in fact.
a pastiche of multiple personages, some of whom were contemporaneous with or even lived before Hillel. That's a very, and I've
So
certainly there.
there's one story. There's only one story in the Talmud which I think is an actual original story of Jesus, and it by 100 years at least.
I think what you said was a little bit marred by poor connection. You said it predates uh, it predates the kind of common conception of Jesus by how long? By 50 years, you said, or 500?
Over 100.
Over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be a not quite a Jesus myth thesis, but just well, the idea of his being one person would be somewhat mythical, but it's like the idea of a historical Jesus that's actually an amalgamation of multiple historical persons.
And I
And
have theological reasons for believing that.
well, that would be interesting to see that. It seems to me like when it comes to the kind of like textual criticism, historical method type things, I think my son just woke up. But when it comes to those things, it's always like we have kind of a limited evidence base on which to even really firmly draw conclusions. So a lot of that depends on the presuppositions that you come in with. But nonetheless, I think that like the scholarly exercise of tracing the rabbinic genealogy of Jesus, even though he said, "Call no man rabbi," he was essentially a rabbi, right?
Yeah.
Everyone would more or less agree to that, and that there was a spiritual tradition in which he was participating. And so I think if we could get Yosef in for that, that would be excellent, because Yosef is, I think you would agree with this, that he's like really like, um, his mind is of the highest,
Yosef
first
is
caliber.
Yosef is the official rabbi of my Discord server.
Yeah, mine too, but he doesn't want you to call him that. But
Yeah,
uh,
that's why I changed his nick to Rabbi Joe Schmo, and he changed it to not a Rabbi Joe Schmo. So
right,
he's officially not a Rabbi Joe Schmo. Chezi is also, so my my Discord server is called Jacob's Ladder, and one of my rules is it's a strict hierarchy. So I have lots and lots of roles, and I move people up and down, right? And the highest role is Elohim, and Yosef and Chezi are Elohim. Yeah.
all right, and Sam from Israel says he also wants to discuss with us.
I don't
Um,
know Sam from Israel. Sam, are you new? Oh, you know what? She's a friend of he's a friend of Claire's. He's one of the he's one of the people she has on. So she has, it's really interesting. Like Claire as a project is really interesting. And Sam, I don't know how to contact you. If you come on Discord, I am interested in talking to you. And Cal looks like he's about to fall asleep on us.
um, yeah, that, and I see my son. He's out here, pitter pattering around. So it's a good time to go. Thank you very much for your time, Jacob, and thank you very much for your time, everyone who happened to watch. Very honored and hopefully we'll see each other soon, some way. Maybe I'll be watching somebody else's conversations, but you know how it is in this little corner of the internet.
Yeah,
So
it can be what do they call it? Non synchronous. Yeah.
yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Okay. I'll
Have
talk
a
to you
great
later.
4th of July.
You too. Happy 4th of
Okay.
July.
All right. God bless.
Bye bye. Okay, Sam, if you want to, if you join my server, I will have you on if you would like. Let me get a link. Well, if okay, so Claire has my email. So if Claire, if you want to send, or here, Claire, I will send you a link. And if you turn your camera on, you can come as well. And you can share the link with the StreamYard link with Sam. So I just sent you a link. That should work. Hey, Torin friends. Nice seeing you again. Sam!
Hey, how are you?
Good. So you actually live in Israel?
Yeah, I do in Haifa.
Haifa. Beautiful gardens.
The Baha'i, I live near the Baha'i Gardens, not too far away.
Yeah, my dad went to Technion.
Oh, really? Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. I live just right by the beach, not too far away from everything. Haifa's a small place, you know, everything's close nearby.
Yeah, I listened to some of your conversations with Claire, and I was actually interested in talking to you. She really misrepresents what I say about Jesus a lot. Well, she misrepresents everything, but I'm not some sort of Christian. Pretty much everything I believe is in line with Orthodox Judaism.
Okay, you're of Persian descent? Is that
Yes. How'd you know?
I think we talked before indirectly. I'm of Iraqi descent. You know, you're in the middle. I'm of Iraqi and Indian descent. Persia's right in the middle there, right between Iraq and India. Near, like,
Well,
you know.
I have family from especially Iraqi Kurdistan, because my family is actually Kurdish. Some like my father's side. So
Yeah, but
some of my family.
that one's between us. There's something there similar in the appearance there.
Yeah.
Something there. Yeah. Hey, where do you live in?
I live in Los Angeles.
Oh, you're in LA. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in Brooklyn. That's where I grew up in the States. Grew up in
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah. So I moved back about 17 years ago. Yeah.
17 years ago. So in 2000, I was at Yeshiva in Or Sameach.
Oh, really? In Israel here.
Yeah, 99, 2000. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's an organization that tries to make people, secular people more religious.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
familiar with it. Yeah.
I became more religious through Chabad, and then after Or Sameach, I'm still kind of sort of a Chabadnik. I don't know. On Friday, I actually had a live stream for Gimel Tammuz with my shliach. He came on for a few minutes to talk about the Rebbe. But so I'm not an actual Chabadnik. Like I don't I'm not Shomer Torah or mitzvot, but the synagogue I rarely go to is Chabad.
Okay, no problem. Similar. Chabadniks are good people.
Yeah.
In living in New York, had access to all the communities. I was friendly towards Chabad, and my mother used to go to their headquarters, and she met the Rebbe, and she got the dollar with the signature and everything. She has it on, and she has a picture of the Rebbe up here in near her bedroom, and we also have a picture of the Ben Ish Chai. So
Okay, yeah.
we have a familial link to him somehow.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My family was, I guess, from a certain lineage in Iraq. We have geniuses in our family. I don't know if it skipped a generation, but I have a little. I have a bit of the sechel, the noggin in my.
Are you familiar with Chacham Hillel?
Which one? Who's that?
Moshe Hillel. Chacham Moshe Hillel. He's alive today. He's Rosh Yeshiva of Ahavat Shalom, and he's generally considered one of, if not the top, Mekubal alive today.
Okay.
He's certainly English speaking. He actually has a YouTube channel, and
familiar. But I'm a very loyal. I wouldn't say I wouldn't call myself ever a follower, but a adherent of my rabbi that's also a Kabbalist, a very well-known Mekubal here in Israel. He's from the south, from a settlement, a moshav by the name of Tlamim, near the Gaza border. He goes by the name of Rabbi Nir ben Artzi. This is the rabbi that I quote all the time. Rabbi Nir ben Artzi, if you look him up. He's very well known. He's a popular Kabbalist here in Israel. He has a large following, many adherents, many people who take him very seriously. His lectures, his lessons. He's a bit of, you could call him a visionary. You can call not a prophet, but a very unique person that has a very long reputation, over 20 years and more, of giving lectures, lessons, alonim, personal counsel. He's very open to anyone that requests blessings and advice from him. He's a very accessible rabbi. And
looks like he's Dati Laomi.
No, just because of the yarmulke. No, not really. He doesn't belong to any real stream of Dati this, Dati that. He's a unique person. He himself says that he's not a rabbi just for one edah, one ethnic group, or one stream. A lot of ultra-Orthodox rabbis swear by him being very special. Both
Yeah, I have. I mean, I just looked him up.
yeah.
I'll have to. I guess
Do
he
you
speaks mostly in Hebrew.
Yes, do your research on him. But he has a lot of help from volunteers and a lot of people that are new arrivals. I helped him out in translating his lectures and lessons into English. He has a lot of people that volunteer and help to translate his lectures into all languages:
I
English,
can
French,
understand, but it's
and
it's
Arabic.
obviously a
He
lot
also
easier for me.
he sent messages even to the Iranians in Farsi translated. So this is not your everyday rabbi. There's no such thing as a coincidence in our faith system. If you
Hashkacha pratit.
yes, there's ashgacha pratit. Okay, so for some reason this evening, Claire contacted me and asked me if I would like to speak to Jacob.
Okay.
And
What about? So Claire, do you know my beliefs about Claire?
I know you're on a confrontational tone with her, or sort of like
I
an
don't think
accusatorial.
she's an individual.
Or maybe she's a you call her a saboteur. All right, she's a bit of a saboteur in your
I
life.
think she's a front for an organization of saboteurs. Yes.
No, I see her as just a free spirit that wants. She grew up in England, and she's multifaceted. She has many sort of like dimensions about her. And because I grew up also in a multicultural city, and you grew up in L.A. in a multicultural city. You have people that they have their opinions. I see her as a traditionalist, a conservative, a female that's actually seen things around the globe where she's lived, and not maybe I wouldn't call her conservative, but a traditionalist.
I think she's thoroughly postmodern. I think she loves Michel Foucault to the point where the only person she will not say bad things about in the
Mhm.
whole world, like you can ask her about anybody and she will have criticisms. She has zero criticisms of Michel Foucault. And I've
Uh-huh.
asked her several times, "Hey, do you have anything to criticize Michel Foucault about?" And um, she's like, I have no idea who he is. And it's like, really? You don't know who Michel Foucault is? It,
She's a very inquisitive intellectual type of personality. I'll grant her that. She goes and pursues and searches out every different type of source and varied
one of the
uh,
most brilliant people I have ever spoken to. And I have spoken to a lot of brilliant people. I like to call Eric Weinstein a friend of mine. He's obviously very brilliant. I have, even Yosef from our channel. Not only has he been doing Daf Yomi for the past 10 years, but
mm,
he also is getting his PhD in artificial intelligence,
oh,
right? And
mhm.
went to and Sam, who sometimes comes on this channel, he's a Unitarian Christian, one of the most brilliant people I have ever spoken to, and he's published in the Lancet and other medical journals for his, so we're talking top quality brains.
Okay.
Uh, Claire Kaw, honestly, when she doesn't turn her camera on, I I have difficulty believing that I'm only talking to one person. Just way too smart.
No, no, she's alone in her apartment. There's nobody there with her. I've
I
spoken to
don't
her.
believe that for a
I've spoken
minute.
to her for hours on hours. She's there
With the
alone in
camera
her
on or with the camera off?
with the camera off. It's her privilege. It's her prerogative to not to
Speak
want to
to
show
her,
her
speak
face.
to her with the camera on. It'll be a different person.
It's the same voice. It's the same person. That's a bit paranoid to think that way. Anyway, we could
Speak to
agree
her
to.
with the camera on. Just speak to her with the camera on. See if it's the same. You've spoken to her for hours with the camera off. Ask her. She doesn't even have to come on. Just talk to her for 20-30 minutes with the camera on.
For hours I've talked to her. All the
with the camera on.
Uh-huh.
You will see different person.
All right. Well, we'll agree to disagree. All right. That's your opinion on the matter.
No, it's a prediction. It's a prediction.
I could call her a friend. She's been a very she's been lent an ear. She was very attentive and very considerate and listening and
be very, very careful. She is very dangerous.
A discussion with her. I think I've influenced her more than she's influenced me. If you want to believe that. But you think she's some sort of agent or some sort of psyop operator? I think you're jumping to conclusions. I've gotten to know this person, and she's a very nice person. She's genuine. I've had disagreements with her, and I've given her.
She's on the internet more than 24 hours a day. More than 24 hours a day.
I think she's very dedicated. I think she's at her wit's end as well. With
she still has to sleep.
I don't think it's a multiple group of people. She's on a lot. She's watching a lot. She's observing a lot. And I think from the website that she's published and posted, I think she's so so pedantic about it comes from her lawyerly kind of a background in her education. She wants to be very pedantic about every
very detailed oriented.
Very in that respect.
Very detail oriented, and she does timestamps for like all these videos that there is no way any single human has as much time as Claire Codd.
I think she's a very smart woman, and she's capable, and I do give her credit for being. It's not some sort of a team or a conspiracy or no. I think you're jumping to conclusions.
I'm not jumping to conclusions. That is my conclusion from having interacted with her. You may disagree, but I would ask you to test it by talking to her with the camera on.
Fine.
That's that. I mean, is that a difficult test?
No, it's not. But we'll agree to disagree. There's other things that we could talk about.
Okay.
Claire shouldn't be the main topic of discussion, although she's a very intriguing person with her education and her oratory skills and her the accent is very appealing and it works as far as
she is a work of art. I actually believe she is an actual work of art.
She's very effective. She's very powerful in her ability to relay information, and the fact that she got to interview Joseph Atwell, the author of Caesar's Messiah, was very impressive. And as far as I saw it as a very impressive achievement, accomplishment. I mean, that guy is also very accessible, but he doesn't give interviews to everybody.
Did you see her interview with E. Michael Jones?
Yes, I did.
She's the only person I've known who's been able to get E. Michael Jones to say things which would alienate his audience.
She's good.
She is excellent. She is. I'm telling you, and to some extent, as a Jew, like, I want to see E. Michael Jones humiliated, but at the same time, I know why she is doing this sabotage. She is sabotaging the right in the world, and the people she is constantly sabotaging, like. I have met many of the smartest people I've ever met just by seeing who she's sabotaging.
Well, I wouldn't, it sounds like you're really kind of painting her into a corner. When she had her 2-hour-long discussion with Joseph Atwell, I don't think she tried to sabotage him. She was proposing all sorts of her thesis on, or her proposals of secular Quranism, secular
She
Islam.
doesn't actually believe in secular Quranism.
She doesn't, but maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. But she uses it as a tool.
Yes.
To try to get to people, trying to get people to think a little clearer about certain things that should be, clear.
She is I mean, when I say she is a work of art, I really mean it. And secular Quranism, like, it's the perfect, it's the first perfect, what do you call it, contradiction, in order to engage with the right in a way that, however you engage with her, right? If you're a Jew and you see secular Quranism, maybe you engage against Islam, or maybe you engage against secularity. But however you engage her, it's that drunken master where she is controlling you.
No. I find a lot in common with her, and I don't see her dominating or controlling me. I see her as being genuinely curious and inquisitive and wanting to know people's positions and takes on things, if they can properly communicate their position, if they have convictions, if they do believe. I think she's a fan of Judaism. In all honest truth, she studies Judaism and she studies the Jews, and she's complimented a lot of religious Jews in many ways.
Yeah,
but it's obviously it's always going to be a bit controversial, because she wants to hear the take from me. She calls me a rare bird because I actually transmit the message of my rabbi, and my rabbi is constantly talking about Mashiach and redemption and the final redemption and Geulah and all the events that we have to look forward to, and all the events.
I think if you pay close attention to how she guides the conversations you have with her, you will see that, in fact, what she's doing is presenting you in the worst light possible.
I don't care. You know what? She has an audience. At this point, my message, if it's received negatively or received positively, all I care about is transmitting my rabbi's message in English to English speakers, because I feel obligated. I feel it's an honor and a privilege to. I've been with this rabbi for over 10 years, maybe more, since 2000.
So what is his message? Like, what is that message that he's trying to
convey? The message is that we are upon Messianic revelation now. Okay, so he's been.
That's not a unique message. I mean, lots of people have said that.
No, but he's been preaching this message for nearly 20 years.
Okay.
And he's been very consistent, and it's I wouldn't call it prophecy, but he gives detailed informations and updates about current events that are to arrive and have arrived, and he gives his analysis on things, but. He's a unique rabbi. You have to listen to him.
But I'm guessing he's not the type of person who is constantly calling all Christians idolaters and saying that they should be executed.
No. What he does say about the missionaries is that he uses the expression hanachash halavan, the white snake. You're familiar with this, the white snake?
I'm not.
Meaning they come disguised as being peaceful, being well-intentioned, and they are deceptive, and they want to poison Judaism, poison the minds of the Jews, like snakes, coming in the guise of friends, coming as a white snake. It's sort of like an innocuous, sort of like a non-threatening.
Do you listen to Tovia Singer or Michael Spock?
Oh my gosh, Tovia Singer! I've been on his comments board for as long as I've been with my Rabbi Nir Ben Alzi. I I'm a huge contributor to Rabbi Singer's comments boards, and I think I've been an influence on Rabbi Singer. I don't give myself this kind of credit. When he was in Indonesia, I was scorning him. I was telling him, "Are you out of your mind? Why are you in Indonesia? You should be in Israel now. We are upon the process of messianic revelation. It is
Does he do live events in Israel or no?
Yes, he does. In
Have you
Jerusalem.
been?
I have not yet met him. It's like I've been lazy. I've been going to Jerusalem to pray at the Kotel from time to time. I always want to look him up and go visit him and introduce myself to him because he knows who I am. And I haven't gotten around to it. I believe I'll eventually get around to it. He knows very well who I am. I grew up in Brooklyn. He grew up in Brooklyn. He's obviously smarter than me. He's more, his mind is powerful, very powerful. He's committed the whole entire New Testament to memory. It's a great accomplishment. The fact that he can do it, what he does to counter the claims of Christianity in the New Testament in Hebrew and in English and in Aramaic, and he knows he studied it his whole entire life. He's an anti-missionary, and the fact that he's able to, at the snap of a finger, just like instant recall, to know exactly which passages, which comment, which quotes, everything he is committed to memory. This is
I'm a big fan. Although I do have to say I like Rabbi Skobach even better.
No, I prefer Rabbi Singer. I prefer Singer's passion and his wit, his approach.
So I call him a Baptist rabbi. I say he's the best Baptist rabbi we've ever had because he's a very Baptist preacher type person.
Yeah, he'll use their tactics against them.
That's not a criticism. That's not a criticism.
Yeah. I think it's necessary. Look, he's been debating them his whole entire life. He sees their charisma. He sees their methodology. He sees how they win people. These missionaries win people over just with by way of pure passion and devotion to what they believe in, without having the ability to defend those positions when challenged academically, when challenged.
What I think is more important, though, is that he actually supports the Noahide movement. Yeah. I don't like the fact that basically most of Orthodox Judaism, some people will actually try to convert people, which I think is misguided and mistaken. But a lot of people will, when somebody comes to convert, they'll say the classic thing of, you can be a good Gentile, you don't need to convert. And then when that person says, okay, I want to be a good Gentile, they wash their hands of them. And I think it's really, really important that as Jews, we support the Noahide community.
Why not? I support them. I speak to them with friends of mine in New York and also in Kansas, in Michigan, and there were a few other in Texas. Look, for me, the Noahide movement is a beautiful thing. It's progress, and it's a sign of Mashiach.
I completely agree with you. And that really, I mean, a lot of what my channel does is support the Noahide movement. So.
Well, a big, huge part of what the Noahites, former Christians, usually the most committed Southern Baptists or evangelicals or even former missionaries. And Toby Singer has a former evangelical missionary from Texas that's part of his team.
Yeah, William Hall. Yeah, I love Tanakh Talk. Yeah,
not just William Hall, but the woman that
from Beinenu. Yeah.
Remind me of her name.
I forget her name, but I can imagine. Like I know the face. What?
Just for curiosity.
The name of the organization is Beinenu.
Beinenu, yeah, but I just her name is there in the Shannon. It's an Irish name. I knew it. Shannon Knudsen. Shannon. She's a very nice woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
But,
yeah. Um, I'm a big fan of Tanakh Talk and the supporting the Noahide movement, because I do think it is showing that yes, we are getting to the end times. I mean, Zechariah says 10 men of each language will grab a Jew by the tzitzis and say, we want to go with you because we've heard God is with you, and it's you in the plural, not in the singular, like the Christians like to make it sound. And
yeah. Good. Sorry, I won't interrupt. Go ahead. Complete your.
and I think that's coming true. Rabbi Skobach says he gets emails every day from Christians saying, "Rabbi, I just want to grab onto your tzitzis."
Well, you know why? I was going to finish my train of thought. I know for a fact that William Hall and Shannon Knudsen, I interacted with them also with comments back and forth, conversations, both on the Benenu site and also on Tanakh Talk and Tovia Singer's comments board. They are searching. They are searchers. They know they've been deceived from birth into the religion they were born with. Whether they don't blame their parents because they see their parents having been also indoctrinated into the same religion that is a false religion that has abused the Hebrew Bible, and they want to know. They're searchers. They want to know how it was done and why it was done. They want their answer. They want their questions answered. They want answers, because they were programmed and they were indoctrinated and they were brainwashed into becoming missionaries. And they did their best to missionize Jews and to make them Jews for Jesus or convert them. And they ran into a lot of resistance by, enough well-educated Jews that could answer their challenges, that it made them curious. And because they were raised their whole entire life believing that this was the truth. So, as far as Jesus is concerned, are you familiar with Jacob Berman and his channel History Valley? Look at that channel up, and I talked to Jacob. He's also in Houston, Texas, and the man is not a very religious Jew, but he's a committed Jew as far as being a scholar and an academic and being committed to first century. Judaism and what evolved into Christianity in the first few centuries of the Common Era. Okay, now you have a lot of skeptics. You have not necessarily, you can't call them 100% mythicists. You have historicists and mythicists, and you have everything in between historicists and mythicists. And he interacts with all of the professors, all of the authors of and scholars professors in Australia, in California. The one that's
I really love Robert Eisenman.
So he interviews him, and he has had him on the show several times. Mm-hmm. And Robert Eisenman was also the inspiration or one of the motivators for Joseph Atwell doing his research and writing his book, Caesar's Messiah. And also he's interviewed the professor from Australia, Rod Blackhurst, PhD from La Trobe University. Very sharp man. I highly recommend listening to Rodney Blackhurst, the professor Rodney Blackhurst, about Aristotle, what his discoveries on Aristotle, and how the Roman Empire actually, prior to Christianity, once they had conquered Greece, actually in a subversive way and in a very deceptive but cunning and an artistic way, usurped and subsumed Greek philosophy via Aristotle and a false history. So once you realize that there's a model, there's a precedent for what the Romans did with literature that was not theirs, and they modified and developed and added to the Greek literature via a false historical personality that was actually invented into history. And he has all of the proofs for this. You should listen to Jacob Berman's interview of Rodney Blackhurst. Go to his channel.
Well, I've heard a lot of these arguments, but
Uh-huh.
for me, I had Rabbi Pinchas Levin. I don't know if you've seen him. He also has a YouTube channel,
Okay.
and he said what I absolutely agree with. Part of the problem and the toxicity of the Noahide movement right now is so many of them are bitter Christians.
Okay.
They're very, very bitter about Christianity, and they're very anti-Christian.
Okay,
And I think, you don't have to believe. There's no need to believe that Jesus even didn't exist in order to do what Rambam says in Hilchot Melachim, right, chapter 11, at the end where it was censored, right, which is that God created Christianity and Islam in order to spread Jewish ideas, and even to have Hakarat Tov. You know what? Yes, Christianity has done a lot of bad things in the world, but they've also done a lot of good things in the world. And one of the good things they've done is put the Hebrew Bible in every hotel room in the world, translated it into every language, made it accessible to the entire world, right? And
but even the Rambam would say post all of the writings, his original writings, if he was with us today, looking back on all the 1,000+ years since he wrote what he wrote, that was it 100% worth it? He would be argumentative, and I mean he's analytical, and he would be very detailed about it.
But you believe in Hashgacha Pratit.
I do. And I will argue that yes, Christianity and Islam, just like the Rambam wrote and believed, was destined and was guided by the hand of Hashem, and for all the evil that was born of it, and all the persecutions of the Jews, and all the murder of the Jews in the name of both Christianity and Islam. I won't disrespect our ancestors and all of our family members throughout all of the Jewish history that had to pay with their lives, and they had to pay with their suffering, and they were humiliated, and they were pushed around, and they were beaten up. In Iraq, in Baghdad, even there are stories from my family that they tell us that we had family members that were by Arab Christians were taunted and called names and insulted, and they actually had gone fisticuffs with them, having to fight them off.
No, I mean, what was surprising, that's not surprising to me. Like, I expect that in history. What was surprising to me was to see that Christians treated each other even worse than they treated Jews at times. Okay. Like, Michael Servetus, who may have been actually halakhically Jewish. He was from Spain, and his mother was known for to be from a Jewish family, possibly. Okay. But Michael Servetus, John Calvin murdered him in cold blood, had him burnt at the stake for the crime of denying the Trinity. So as far as I'm concerned, whether he was Jewish or not, this is a man who died really because, and they had a whole trial, and they accused him of a lot of things, and the only thing they convicted him of was denying the Trinity. And so as far as I'm concerned, Jew or Gentile, this is somebody who died al Kiddush Hashem, who died for the belief that there is only one God, and we can't forget. And this is part of what I don't like, and I believe is the sabotage that Claire does, is she deliberately, she's constantly trying to destroy. So look at this comment she made about Shannon Newson is her name.
Yeah,
Shannon is a former Christian. Why are Orthodox Jews trusting a former Christian with Christian associates and family she might alienate to protect their interests? Would you put a Dracula in charge of a blood bank? Like, this is poisonous stuff that Claire is saying about
she's
somebody.
passionate. She's
No,
passionate.
this is sabotage. She's trying to engender distrust and dislike among among Jews. We have several commandments to love the convert. Am I going to distrust Shannon Newson forever, despite the fact that it is a mitzvah, mitzvat aseh deoraita, to love the convert?
No, I gave her a lot of compliments on her video, and I sent her a lot of love as far as being a convert to Judaism. And I have a friend who converted as well in New York, John Gisela. Yochanan.
And this is the type of thing that when I say what Claire is a saboteur, I think
sometimes she jumps to conclusions. She's not a saboteur. I wouldn't call
her. I think she's deliberately trying to sow enmity. Like, she always comes on whenever I have a Christian on, and I have Christians on a regular basis, and I'm in the hopes of helping them understand their religion better, because I do believe their Christianity has the seeds of Judaism in it. She always comes on, and that's why she was on here. She's always trying to sabotage these.
I won't sabotage it. I won't be a saboteur, but I'll recommend to you to further investigate the depths of the origins of Christianity, because that's what
I'm pretty well versed.
You're familiar with all the positions, because when I spoke to Shannon, and I constantly debated and argued, hardcore missionary Christians on Tovia Singer's comments board in his videos, whether it was for a sport or for as a learning experience. I just wanted to know what kind of methods and tactics they use, how they've been tutored, how they've been instructed to approach the Jews, and what kind of tactics of debate and argumentation they use, and how they try to basically corner you or suck you into all sorts of sucker debates.
There are people like that, but I think having a confrontational attitude, I don't generally like, if somebody's actually trying to pull missionary tricks on me. I'm well versed enough. If you watch my videos, I think you will see I'm well versed enough to counter anything like that. Okay. At the same time, I have real conversations with Christians in which I'm not attacking them. I am trying to help them see that their religion, that in fact, I believe. Have you heard of the book The Mythmaker by Chaim Maccabee?
No.
It's a great book. You would, I think you would really love it. And he, so
but in Christianity they call Jesus a myth for the world, and they think that's a.
So the idea, and Robert Eisenman seems to really agree with this belief, is that, and several rabbis have said this, it is possible, and I think it actually is true, that a lot of what is included in the Christian Bible as stories of Jesus are actually stories of genuine rabbis teaching Judaism. Because you see, like, things like in Matthew where he's saying, if anybody who keeps the law and teaches others to do the same will be greatest in the kingdom of God, and anybody who tramples on even the smallest and teaches others the same is far from the kingdom of God. And so my attitude has always been, and I think it's far more effective than the types of things that Claire is trying to goad me into doing, which is like being like, no, Jesus was Satan, and you had to
being confrontational. Okay, I understand, and being more aggressive and being more proactive and being more accusatory. There is
Well,
some.
she says anytime I have a Christian on, she's like, why do you have this idolater on? And it's
All right,
like,
well,
they all
let me.
know that I believe the Trinity is idolatry.
Uh-huh.
That's clear. It's not something I hide. But at the same time, I can talk to Christians about their Bible and help them understand their Bible
Well,
better.
I believe in being brutally honest with the Christians now for
I
their own
agree with
benefit
you.
and their own sake. Look, I've been a long time supporter of Alex Jones and Infowars for over 20 years.
Okay.
I'd say no, nearly since I moved back to Israel, like around 2005, 2006, I really became a listener and a fan and a supporter. And I think I'm not even just going to assume or presume or think. I know I am an influence on Alex Jones.
Okay.
Yes. And he's a stern Baptist Christian from a missionary family, going back to the Pilgrims and going back to the Mayflower. All right, his family lineage is very long. Also, with the heroes and the patriots of Texas, the founders of Texas, his family goes as far as connected to them, being linked to them, and he's related to them. We're the same age. He was born a month before I was. I became very friendly with him. I warmed up to him, and I was a guide, I would say, in a certain way, for Alex Jones. Not necessarily controlling him or telling him what to do. I was an influence on him. I gave him certain cues. I lent him a lot of moral support. I lent him a lot of spiritual support, and he's a Christian. And he's a firm believer, and he doesn't want to sway or move on at all on Jesus. Even though I told him to his face, and many times in the comments and the videos that he listens to, and he monitors my videos, what I post on Facebook or on YouTube. He knows. I mean, he listens to what I say. I know for a certainty that he does, and even Jay Dyer. All right, so and he's a Christian Orthodox academic and a very learned, very smart person, but he won't surrender on Jesus either. But recently they compromised. They said the Antichrist could be the fascist state. It doesn't necessarily have to be what the Book of Revelations is claiming, that the Jewish Messiah, the much anticipated savior of the Jews, will be the Antichrist. They've kind of changed their tune. They bent a little, and they are actually now focusing more on let's say what they always focus on, the overreach of government, the totalitarian kind of nature of government that pretends to not be that way but is really that way. The deep state, all these extra national organizations that are in league with one another that we're all familiar with now. They're no longer, just it's something, amorphous that you're not allowed to talk about. Everybody talks about them now, and so that it always is, kind of sparked my interest. And now you have another Jew in New York City that goes by the name of Melanie Klein, I think her last name is, and she's a supporter of Trump, but she's also on the same level of exposing the real puppet masters, the hidden hand, the real.
Well, I think Claire Caw is part of that hidden hand.
Fine, but I think she's just passionate as being born into the kind of world she's born into, and she's pissed off at England and the British, and where liberalism is
I think it's all an act. I think this is all an act. She's just sabotaging people like you who
no. No, 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 no. I
could
don't
be
care.
a
I
lot
don't care.
more effective without her influence
No, no, no,
than
no.
you
I
are
like
with
her
her influence.
platform, and I like the having my interactions and conversations with her. Even though she can seem as though that's what she's doing, I can correct her and give her my perspective honestly on all issues and all subjects. No matter how touchy, no matter how controversial. Like we talk about Adam Green, okay, and Adam Green. You know who that Adam Green is. Extremely high strung and spinning his wheels on Judaism. As far as you want to talk about somebody that's really reaching and kind of like, oh, he's just trying to find the insidious sort of like the criminal or the ill-intentioned motivations of all Jews to sabotage Christians and to control the mind and control Christians by what you just said of what the Rambam said. He uses that as a conspiracy against Judaism, saying, oh, well, they want us all to be subservient to their God and bow down to their God by way of Christianity and Islam. The guy has a real chip on his shoulder. You should look him up on BitChute. He goes by the name of Adam Green. And he has another Egyptian, Arab Christian, Coptic, also who left.
Well, this is not. I mean,
Albert
this is something that in this corner. I mean, well, not this corner because we have a little corner of the internet, but the corner of the internet that you're talking about, the idea that Christianity. I mean, Red Ice certainly subscribes to this idea.
Right.
And
they interview
when
Adam
you
Green. Adam Green is a regular guest on Red Ice.
Right. So Claire definitely, when she's talking to people like that, she's also, I mean, again, I think when you pay enough attention to her, you will see she sabotages all kinds of people by saying different things to different people and getting them. In fact, she brings up inflammatory things in ways that I think are easily misunderstood, that I think you have to be very careful when you talk to her, that she's not in fact positioning you to say things in a manner where they will be misunderstood. I think that's why I think she's so dangerous.
She's not dangerous at all. I'm more dangerous than she is because I'm more honest and repeating my rabbi's message, which is not about finding some common ground with either the Christians or the Muslims. It's about telling them to their face the honest truth about what we're facing. And the thing about it is, he's not. My rabbi is been very concerned about relaying warnings to the Jews living in the diaspora outside of Israel regarding the much anticipated what's called in Hebrew a kibbutz galuyot, or the full gathering.
The gathering of the exiles, yes.
The full gathering of the exiles that is in progress. And the thing about it is, it's not diplomatic, it's not pleasant, and it's not.
No, hold on. Yeah, this is a false dichotomy. You don't need to always. Yes, sometimes you need to be confrontational, but you don't need to always be confrontational. And I think that's what Claire does.
I agree.
She turns everything, and you can speak the truth without. And she is deliberately causing people to say things which are very, very inflammatory.
She could be, but I don't think she's doing it consciously or deliberately. It's just her passion, her conviction on Christianity, which she.
You think it's a coincidence that she goes and finds all these small channels where very intelligent people are saying things, and she gets them to say things which in fact alienate what could be much larger audiences? I don't think that's. I have seen her do it channel after channel after channel.
No, well, I don't have a channel. Well, I don't. I used to have a channel. I got clinked. I got censored by YouTube. And then
I have to wonder if Claire influenced you in saying things.
No. I didn't know her back then. It was just by virtue of my being inflammatory with my friend John Gishela about the same things. And once you find the true origins and the true motivations and that the hidden agendas behind Christianity, despite the fact that it was God's will, it was the will of Hashem that Christianity should come about. But when in the final episode of the end times, which we are
And
in
the
now,
vast majority of Christians are good-meaning people
yes,
who
yes,
are.
yes, yes. But they
Um,
have to be. But they have to be put in their place when it comes to the truth
what?
and the origins.
See,
And the,
I don't like that. What does that mean? Put in their place?
well, you have
It's
to
not my
become more.
place. It's not
No, no, no,
my
no, no,
place
no,
to put anybody in their
no,
place.
no, 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 no. You have to do more research as far as the real criminal and sinister origins of Christianity. It is not an organic religion. It is a very mechanical religion that was devised in a mechanical way. And if you are familiar with the Roman provenance theory, that is where you should really focus your attention.
No,
Despite,
because ultimately Hashem runs the world,
yes,
and
yes, but at
and
the end
everything and
it's
everything that was done in Christianity, ultimately the only way to defeat Christianity is to elevate the Nitzotzei Kedusha that are within it, to free them from the husk. And that our job of birur always has to be to take the good from the bad instead of concentrating on the bad.
All right. Well, the best way to free the
Sparks of holiness,
the sparks of holiness, Netzutzei Kedusha, from the klipa is by destroying the klipa. Okay, the klipa are the lies within Christianity, and the origins and the roots and sources of Christianity is the klipa.
I completely agree with you that I am constantly talking against the Trinity. I am constantly talking against
Jesus himself. Jesus himself is klipa.
I don't believe so. I don't
absolutely.
believe so.
You have to dig deeper and research more about the true origins of what that thing is.
The true origins, but no. Hold on. Was Jesus a Jew?
Device.
Was Jesus a Jew?
No, he wasn't. He was a
you don't believe he was a Jew at all?
Character. No.
What? You're a mythicist?
I'm not a mythicist. I'm also a historicist. But you have to understand all the multi-layers and all the intrigues here.
James, the brother of Jesus, was he Jewish?
No. You're going according to Eisenman here.
I agree with Eisenman. I think he has a correct history.
Eisenman has a theory that basically the Essenes of the first century were violent rebels. They were not pacifists.
I know.
All right. So the families that are mentioned in the New Testament were turned into a kind of ascetic pacifists, right. And they were turned into a non-threatening, a sort of spiritual.
That is Eisenman's. That is Eisenman's theory.
So Jacob Berman also subscribes to the theory that the original person of Jesus, the historical Jesus, was a member of the Essene movement that was actually being groomed to become.
But that makes him a Jew.
But the true original identity of the person was taken, hijacked, and turned on its head by the Romans.
But he was a Jew.
No, but that's the historical person. The person of the Gospels needs to be investigated so thoroughly to the point where he's totally. No. Listen good, Jacob. To the point where that thing, that invention, has to be utterly obliterated because it is psychological warfare of the highest order. You have to understand these things before you start talking about Jesus. Listen,
Sam, you're acting like I'm disagreeing with you. I don't.
Okay, but the Christians.
Hold on. You're saying exactly what I'm saying,
mm-hmm.
right? So you're saying Jesus was a Jew, and I believe that the various people, because I don't believe it was one person, I believe the various people who became identified and created into this image of Jesus were in fact Jews and religious Jews. Hear me out. And this image of him was created, which, yes, does need to be shattered because it is klipa, but there is a nitzotz of kedusha, because everything has to have a nitzotz of kedusha in order to exist at all. That is the kernel there. And I actually believe, why do we say Yeshu Yamach Shamo Zichro? Because I believe that the names of those Jews has been lost in history, and I believe that was a chesed that Hashem did in order that they should not become chas v'shalom avodah zara. And so the avodah zara of Yamach Shamo Zichro has to be destroyed. At the same time, the only way to do that is to realize that even the klipa gets its chiyut from Nitzitzei the Kedusha. It is impossible for anything to exist.
I can agree with you that it couldn't have survived for 2,000 years if it was not God's will, and if there was not some sort of spiritual purpose for this false religion to survive this long, to have functioned and served its purpose as is.
And we have to do birur. We cannot just say throw out the baby with the bathwater. We have to, in fact, do birur. Our work is birur.
Well, the birur I'm doing is that most of the Noachites understand they can identify Rome and Christianity as the last beast described in the book of Daniel, taking forms. And actually, Rabbi Singer said this, that it had many, it shapeshifted, it had many heads, it had many, incarnations throughout history, and that's Rome. That's the
How
Roman
much
Empire.
do you know about Mashiach ben Yosef?
I know that according to what my rabbi said, that Mashiach ben Yosef was the Baba Sali, and he died in the 90s.
I think that Mashiach ben Yosef, and Rav Kook said similar things.
Yeah.
I believe that Mashiach ben Yosef is not an actual single human person. I think that
the soul of Mashiach incarnates in every generation, both Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David.
And I think that Mashiach ben Yosef, whose defining characteristic is to die, and if you see in Sukkah, there's actually in the Talmud Sukkah, there's a disagreement, and we say Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, right? That whether it's Mashiach ben Yosef that it's talking about when it says that there will be the Hesped, or if it's Malach HaMavet, right, the Satan. And so I think that, in fact, Christianity and the many people, because it says about, it says in Mashiach ben Yosef in Yeshayahu, it says Bemotav, right, which for me was very interesting. Why Bemotav, and in the plural, in his deaths, it says.
Yeah, that's the Jewish people. It's the Jewish people.
The Jewish people, including those people,
Yeah.
I believe, who were, in fact, turned into this Jesus.
Yeah, okay, no problem. It was the original, I don't disagree, it was the original rebel movement. They were pure-hearted. They were fanatic about purifying the temple, deposing the wicked temple priests. They were preparing a king. They were preparing priests. I agree with Eisenman's position that was most likely the real, Essene rebel movement that inspired. Believe it or not, I was listening to James Valiant on the author of Creating Christianity. On Jacob Berman's channel. I was listening to one of the shows and the interviews, and he revealed that Pliny the Elder, one of the top Roman academics of his day during the reign of Nero, and later on with the other
Okay, Sam.
Claudius.
I didn't actually realize I meant to stop at 1 because I have to go to my parents. It's 4th of July here.
I'll just tell you this.
Yeah,
Pliny the Elder, it was a historian. He was a propagandist for the Romans, and he went and infiltrated the Essene movement. This is not well-known history of the Romans. He went and studied them for about a year. He infiltrated their movement, and he studied them. He took notes on them, and what he was doing military reconnaissance. And in the time of the Romans,
I think you would really like Chaim Maccabee's book, The Mythmaker. I think you would agree with him. I believe that it was actually Paul of Tarsus who was the person who created the Christianity that we know.
Yes,
and he was not Jewish.
It could be the Paul of Tarsus, could be Pliny the Elder. There were propagandists, military reconnaissance being done. The Romans were very sophisticated. They understood what drove the minds of the Jews.
I have heard these theories. I don't think it's necessary to go that far. I have nothing against that.
But you have Philo Alexander. Philo Alexander in the first part of the Common Era, the first century.
What about him?
Well, the Alexander family were conspirators together with the Flavians.
Oh, I've seen Caesar's Messiah, and
read the book, not just the documentary. Look, the Philo of Alexandria of the Alexander family, his nephew Tiberius.
Sam, I really don't see the value in this.
He was second in command with Titus Flavius in sacking Jerusalem.
I don't see the value of this.
There is value. They were Hellenistic Jews. It was all incestuous. Even the members of the Maccabee family, the Hasmoneans, were in bed with the Flavians and the Alexanders.
I have no problem with anybody believing that. I don't see why it matters.
It's documented. Okay, but I'll agree with you.
Okay, let's say it's true. Let's say it is true. What does it matter?
You want to look at the esoteric and more of the mystical side of why Hashem allowed Christianity and why he birthed it and why he allowed for the confusion of having the two aspects of Judaism splinter into what became rabbinical Judaism and what later on became Christianity. Which is a watered-down Judaism, Hellenistic Judaism, blended in with Greco-Roman paganism to accommodate the interests of the Roman propagandists who created it, and the Caesars themselves, and their teams of propagandists and intellectuals. And for this, and on top of all this, I'm not saying that it served no purpose. I can see the long-term purpose that Hashem had for Christianity, but it was used as a whip against us.
Yes, I mean you're not saying anything new. I don't know why.
So the Christians
where is the disagreement?
If you want to educate the Christians, you should give them the full truth. They
the
should
full truth. This is way too much.
The man of Jesus, the real historical man of Jesus, whoever that guy was, is irrelevant. All right?
No, that's not true. No, that's not true at all. That's not true at all.
His history and identity was perverted, just like the Hebrew Bible was perverted by the Greco-Romans and Hellenistic Jews in the service of the Roman Empire. That is the harsh and infuriating truth that the Christians have to come up against in order for them
that Christianity is based on a foundation of Judaism. That is the truth they need to know.
It's based on perverting and uprooting and usurping Judaism in the most vile of ways. All right. It's also there are many hidden plots within the so-called New Testament, the so-called Gospel. They were trying to imitate the multi-layers of meaning.
What are we disagreeing about?
The Torah, the typology of the Torah.
What do you think I disagree with you about?
If you're not disagreeing with me, then you should realize that the Christians should understand the insidious and nefarious nature of Jesus and the false religion that was built up around him. Whether the positive aspects of Christianity spreading around the world and turning a lot of pagan idolaters into semi-pagan idolaters in worshiping the pagan idol of Jesus.
Of course, that's a good thing.
fine. Okay, it moderated the paganism, it moderated the idolatry.
That's a good thing.
In order to have a full completion of the circle and closure, the Christians should come up face to face with the truth and realize that it's our duty to tell them that Jesus is a false pagan idol god in every aspect, in every way.
Sam, what how I would put it is for them to understand that how they understand Jesus is actually not true. And the real Jesus, the actual historical Jesus, was the Jewish people. No, it's not irrelevant, because that is the source, that is the Kedusha that is animating, and you have to identify the Kedusha within it. Okay, I have to go. My mom's going to kill me.
Isaiah 53 is about the Jewish people. I agree.
And the important thing to do is to point at the light and the Kedusha within the Klippa, as opposed to just talking about the Klippa.
Of the Gospels is fake.
What?
The Jesus of the Gospels is fake. They have to make peace with that.
I completely agree with you.
It's hard for them.
Except I believe that there is a nitzotz of Kedusha, which is based on the true people who actually taught the good things that, in fact, so like Rabbi Tovia Singer always says, and I love this saying, the New Testament is filled with many new and wonderful things. The problem is the new things are not wonderful, and the wonderful things are not new.
Yes,
and I agree. I think that has to be, as opposed to saying, no, the New Testament is all corruption and bad and needs to be uprooted. What we need to be saying is the wonderful things in the New Testament are not new, and the new things are not wonderful.
That's what I think a lot of Christians should be given credit. They're not stupid. We should not insult their intelligence. I think they know these things. It's just a matter of their pride being in the way, and there having been hundreds of years of trying to force Jesus down the throats of the Jews.
You will never defeat darkness with darkness. You can only defeat darkness.
I'm not even guilt tripping them. I'm just telling them, look at the history, look at what was done, and if you want to atone for all of the evil,
look at the difference between how you put it and how I put it.
I know there are good things there, but as far as today's Christians,
so you have to say that. You have to say that.
I agree. I'll repeat that message. I'll repeat Rabbi Tovia Singer's message. But if we are supposed to be true to our faith and true to our calling and our purpose, and also faithful to our ancestors that were burned and murdered in the name of a false god, we're not trying to bend their will. We're just putting the truth in their face, the harsh truth, and it's a fulfillment of messianic prophecy.
Hold on. Why the harsh truth? Why not the beautiful truth? Why is the truth harsh?
Because Jesus is an instrument of violence and mind control. It's harsh.
You're making a mistake.
No, 2,000 years of
You're making a huge mistake.
2,000 years of history attest to it. And
you are not doing birur. You are not doing birur. You are making the worst mistake.
No, Esav, Edom, will have to atone for 2,000 years of brutalizing and murdering and persecuting the Jews.
You are 100
false God.
Again, not disagreeing at all. Mm-hmm. What we must always do is birur. We must take the good from the bad.
Fine.
I
agree with you fully. The problem I have is that their stubborn insistence as missionaries and as bullheaded, stiff-necked, blockheaded types to constantly want to bend the will of the Jewish people and get them to believe in Jesus.
Sam,
now that is confrontational.
The people who do that, I am as against, but the vast majority of Christians are not like that.
All right, but in the back of their minds, if they don't want to, give up and discard Jesus and become Noachites, then they want to find a compromise.
They don't need to. Hold on, the Sanhedrin. Remember that there was the Sanhedrin when that Rabbi Steinsaltz tried to create, they actually made a Beit Din for Noachites. And even that Beit Din said that to be a Noachite, you don't necessarily have to renounce Oto Ha'ish.
What?
Yep.
Joe, no. Well, you know what?
They said that. Go look it up.
Well, you know what? That Sanhedrin is not worth its weight in you know what?
I think you're making a huge mistake, but I really have to go. My mom will kill me.
Sorry, but watch it. I mean, consider Roman provenance again as the real truth.
The nitzotz, the kedusha that is there must be identified and must be clearly identified.
Well,
and that's why I think you're making a huge mistake by being so confrontational with Christians.
We'll agree to disagree, but I'll leave you with this message. What my rabbi said for over 20 years. Time is up for the Jews of the diaspora. You will be forced back to Israel in the full ingathering of the exiles the hard way, because you have failed to focus mentally and intellectually on God's process of pushing you back to Israel. Soon there will be a calamity in the world.
I would move to Israel in a second if I believed that that's what God wanted me to do.
Well, you're going to find out that that's the case.
The work still has to be done. The work still has to be done, and fleeing to Israel is not doing the work.
The Jews' purpose amongst the Gentiles has ended. The process is complete.
It has not ended. It has definitely not ended.
Benefit that the Jews have to offer the Gentiles. You are a burden upon them right now. Even Hashem wants you here, and He will turn the world upside down.
Then what? Why are you bothering? If all the work is done, why do you have a channel?
I'm debating you to transmit my rabbi's message to you. My rabbi is repeating.
Okay, so you have no message for Gentiles at all.
My message to Gentiles is surrender your belief in a false idol God that is proven.
So why do you have a message if the work is done? Why do you have a message?
Not to them. My intent was to speak to you and to
but you do speak to Gentiles.
No, it's important
so stop talking to Gentiles. If the work is completely done, stop.
I'm talking to Gentiles from Israel. In my vindication.
No, you're talking to Claire Koss. She's not from Israel.
No, I'm in Israel. I'm not overseas as a diaspora
so
Jew.
What? So you're doing the work long distance as opposed to doing it the group, and that's a good thing.
There's no problem with that. You're not supposed to.
Yes, there's a huge problem with that. You have to do the work for goof.
No more interaction with them. You'll be all forced back against your will. They will turn on you. Turn on you.
You are so your very interactions with Claire are the precise opposite of everything you just said.
No. I'm working to drive the Jews back to Israel against their
will. Jews. Then why are you talking to Claire?